Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Way We Grow podcast, a production of the Craft Growers Network. I'm your host, Nick Wolfe. Today, our guest is Jarret Richie of Next Big Crop. Jarret, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it, Nick.
Yeah, for sure. It's great to have you here. You came highly recommended by one of our former guest, Jesse of Mothership Labs. So it's great to have someone else on here who's as professional as he is, and you know, but from a different angle of sort of what you're applying that cannabis knowledge to in your professional life. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about your background and what Next Big Crop is and what you do there?
Sure, thank you. So I guess in a former life, I was a secondary social studies teacher, and I bartended for years and stuff like that before that. But sort of graduated college and then moved out to Denver. I guess it's almost 18-ish or so years ago. So I moved out here, and then I got a job at this really cool bar, like in the just neighborhood spot that had live music 3, 5 nights a week, and sort of didn't really, like those small sort of things that like really change your life forever kind of thing. So that bar, Highland Pacific, um, we used to joke it was almost like Highland Pacific Wellness Center at night. So there's a whole lot of talented gardeners and just music people and just sort of all walks of life there. So I got that job and I went back to school to finish I had a social studies degree and I went back to get my education sort of degree as well to be a teacher. So I was bartending and going to school. And then one of the owners was like, "Do you want to come trim for us?" So he kind of drugged me up the hill to Netherland where they had some houses going and started trimming for him. And then real quick after that, I was like, well, I want my own lights and I want to do this on my own. So started doing that while I finished my teaching degree. So I would like bartend at night and go to school during the day and somehow started growing a bunch of weed in between, all of that. And like, I think I hid it from my friends for about a year what I was doing, before somebody kind of finally figured it out. Um,
Sure.
that kind of thing. So when I finished my teaching degree and started teaching, and I realized that I didn't really want to sort of continue with that, um, I called a buddy at one of the local hydro shops, Way to Grow, and I was like, "Coach, will you hire me? I want a job. I don't want to be a teacher." And he was like, "Cool, you start Monday. We're going on fish tour." Um, so then pretty much, yeah, it was one of the, like they had a happy hour for all the teachers, and they were like trying to on like a Friday trying to get me to like commit to taking this job, and I skipped that happy hour and I went and hung up 8 lights in a friend's garage,
Nice.
kind of thing. And then that Monday I started working at Way to Grow. Um, so then, we could talk about Way to Grow and that sort of education as we continue, but like, that was like it was like Way to Grow University. It really kind of a whole lot of like-minded people doing a lot of work, working at the same stores, doing everything.
Sure.
So I worked there for a good 4 or 5 years, and had lots of projects going on here, kind of like passion projects, if you will. And then, you sort of hit that point where you're like, sort of just getting tired of sitting behind the counter at Way to Grow and solving everybody else's problems. And you sort of develop this like process of deduction, sort of procedure, instinct, kind of thing. People just come up and sort of dump their problems on you. You try to help them solve it. So I applied for a job at a local grow here in town, and wait or Next Big Crop was actually managing it. So they were kind of like, "You're a little overqualified for the position we're looking for." Um, and then maybe 2, 3 months later, I got a job interview with Next Big Crop, the group, the consulting group that was managing it, and then I got a job with Next Big Crop. So sort of managed that spot, and then we had a spot up in Glenwood Springs, this like beautiful greenhouse, and then it turned into a big like 50,000 square foot spot in Maryland that was like a super educational experience with a really good crew. Um, like Next Big Crop wrote all the applications for this group, Greenleaf, which is in like Maryland and then Pennsylvania, Virginia, Ohio, and maybe New Jersey. So sort of designed all their spots, um, filled it up, taught them how to operate. They sold to Columbia Care for like couple $100 million kind of thing after a few
Woo!
years. Yeah, it was a big one. Like definitely feather in the hat. Like, I think we designed and started operating with them like I don't know, just shy of probably 200,000 square foot kind of thing. They
Hmm.
really turned it on. And then since then, did Oklahoma and Next Big Crop was part of a publicly traded company called General Cannabis. So when some of the laws changed about publicly traded companies actually owning sort of cannabis businesses, they were about to sell us to one of the competitors because they wanted to go into a different direction. So myself and now my two partners, Rich and Christian, um, sort of decided to buy Next Big Crop away and went private from General Cannabis.
Okay.
So that was, I think, August will be 4 years or maybe 5 years at this point that we've been private and away from the publicly traded group. So like in that time, I've done all kinds of stuff, pretty much every, just it really depends like where we meet a client in their journey. Some application writing, some financial models and all that kind of stuff. Then we would design facilities for them. We have engineers and like, depending on, you know, building from the ground up or, sort of a retrofit to something else that was already existing. And then from all the way to grow years, sort of had all those contacts with every sort of supplier and rep and nutrient company and lighting manufacturer. So pretty much have every wholesale account you can imagine. So then we sort
Yeah.
of will outfit those facilities with all the equipment, spec all the stuff, do like P and ID, like, irrigation designs, fertigation stuff, like all the building management systems. And then in lots of these spots with like competitive new markets, it's not like Colorado or California, Oregon, Washington, where there's sort of that legacy work that had been done. So then I started getting on planes and flying out there and teaching people how to run their facilities, kind of thing.
For sure.
So did that for a handful of people. And I guess sort of still do that till today. Now we're just a little bit more selective of who we work with and kind of like the projects, you have to make sure everybody's like same values, equal vision, like that kind of thing. So
Right.
really kind
Yeah, you
of
don't want to.
whatever somebody needs, we have done and will continue to assist.
For sure. Yeah, it's really hard to take on a project when the the vision doesn't align with what you can provide, because sometimes people want to like do something that's so esoteric or like very unique, and it's like they want that uniqueness to be their sort of brand and their stamp that they're putting on the product that's coming out of it. But in a lot of aspects, these legacy practices are not sustainable in the current market, and it's really hard to find people that are willing to change and understanding that there is ways to improve and that maybe their secret sauce isn't that secret.
No, well, and also just like, you know, um, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here either, kind of thing. Like there really is sort of like that, every situation is different. Like every single one is different, but there really has to like sort of be this like sort of uh optimal like execution of this plan. Like
Right.
so sometimes people think that I'm going to come in and do this. I'm going to, and like sure on paper maybe that not even on paper, maybe just like in fantasy that sounds great. But on paper it makes
Yeah,
whatever as much sense. In reality like um it doesn't when it comes to some of these more like commercial competitive situations.
for sure.
Like I don't know, like don't
Would
get
you
me
mu-
wrong, it's fun to fantasize about all this. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. But like you're like, yeah, it's expensive, it's costly to make mistakes or to not have that right vision. So like really is a lot of thinking and planning.
do you have the ability to talk about any people that were looking to become your clients that you had to turn down? I mean, you don't even need to necessarily name them,
Sure.
but perhaps some of the things that they were trying to achieve that were untenable and just not necessarily feasible with either what they had available to them for resources, or in general, if it was something where it was just like, this is poor agriculture and you shouldn't be doing this. And if that's your sticking point, then we're out.
Sure. I guess some of the, maybe 10 and 15 years ago, when it was more of a competitive market. And when I say competitive, I mean like limited licenses going out. People would throw money at you sort of without thinking. So people could raise one, two, 10, whatever, however many millions of dollars to sort of build these spaceships, if you will, to operate. Um, and I guess it's not quite the same as, today as it is then. So there's lots of people sort of have these grand visions, but they really don't have the capital to back it up, or they don't really have the experience to back it up. So again, it's like, sure, dude, you could throw up 10 lights in a garage with your buddies over a weekend. Um, but you can't do that with 500 lights when the city's inspecting you, the fire marshal's inspecting you, and like there's all of that sort of compliance that has to go with it. So I'd say like the biggest hang up is people really, sure, the dream of what they want it to be kind of thing. And also like people don't realize how much it really costs to operate. And, lots of people, now you have lawyers, you have CPAs, you have all of this stuff that kind of goes along with it, in like that professional world that you don't have with like a passion project at your house. So I feel like
Yeah.
that's probably the biggest, are people trying to shove, one of those things of like, you can fit this much light because you have this much power, so your HVAC, everything's got to fit numbers wise,
Right.
for these facilities to work. Or you could be like the best grower in the world, but you don't have enough, dehumidification to have control, or, so trying to sort of balance like the fantasy versus reality versus true expectations. Like you're never going to hit 3 and 4 pounds every time. There's going to be hiccups. So just people having the realistic uh, understanding of sort of how hard it is to, to sort of hit repeat, 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 um,
Right.
is probably the biggest. And I guess some of the new stuff is, I'm going to do autos from, and which I love, whatever, but again, there's just like, I guess the new I'm gonna do this. It's gonna I'm gonna reinvent the game, and all this kind of stuff. You're like, no, man, like, don't get me wrong. Some of those ideas are totally real. They work. People are executing them. But you've never done this before, so just to sort of gamble on something so big, uh,
Sure.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, it almost like helps to set up people's expectations within reason so that they know that, and we see this all the time too, whenever I'll go and look at another facility or something and people are asking for help, that they'll be like, this is my goal. And sometimes the goal does not match what you have available to achieve that goal.
Exactly.
And setting up more reasonable expectations for what you already have available is so crucial because you can create, you know, I haven't seen a facility that doesn't have the ability to create awesome product. The thing is that they have to be okay with either a quantity of awesome product that, may not be what they were originally hoping for, which kind of can temper some expectations down a little bit where they're going, oh man, I really wanted to, 10x my investment within the first 2 years. And you're going, that's going to be maybe 5 to 10 years from now,
Yeah.
if you're lucky and you don't have crop loss after crop loss due to, you know,
Or
your
whatever.
lack of
Yeah.
HVAC or your reuse of soil if you're in some sort of like living soil facility, or your input costs are, you initially bought this giant pallet of inputs 5 years ago, and it's been sitting there and working great, but when you start to look into buying it again, it's going to be 10 times the cost that it was 5 years ago. It's
Yeah,
all
and
these
also
different
one of the
things that.
biggest ones is I feel like, right along the lines of what you're saying is like when markets open, the price per pound is however high. As more facilities open, um, I don't even know where we want to start with that number, kind of thing. But like,
Right.
if you can't basically sell your pounds at $1,000 a pound and still be profitable with that, like you can still run a profitable business at that. But
Yep.
if it costs you $800 to grow a pound and the market's really only offering $600 to $800 a pound for that, that sort of model that you gave all your investors a year or 2 years prior, is just like irrelevant. So that's probably
Right.
one of the hardest things to get everybody on the same page with, is kind of like, sort of understanding the cost of that operation versus what when the pound, when the market gets flooded and it comes down, like,
Yep.
where's that balance point?
I mean, Oklahoma is a great example and case study for anybody that wants to look into where it started and where it is.
Yeah.
And it happened so quickly. Like I feel like Oregon and California, while they did have, massive booms in production when everything went legal and recreational, uh, the price never plummeted as fast in such a short amount of time. We're all still now around the same price across the country,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but it took us a decade to get there versus 18
I,
months.
yeah, did a lot of work in Oklahoma when that sort of went off. Um, And just like you sort of say, like, everybody's got their own thoughts about this, that, whatever. But like in Oklahoma, there was like two agents or so. There's something like that for the whole state, and they gave out 13,000 some licenses. So there was no inspections, there was no whatever. Like basically, we built a really beautiful greenhouse for a client that we operated, and like the only rules were basically like you could do whatever you wanted outside as long as it was behind a fence. So I filled up an acre and did what I could, and yeah, at the end of the summer we had 4,000 some pounds on the 1 acre, and that was just 1 acre, and I knew of farms that had 50, and there was the stories of
Yeah,
the guys with 500, and so at that point there was more product there than in a short time than anywhere else.
yeah. And it's still not even recreational, is it?
No, they shut that down.
Yeah,
Still a medical market.
that's insane. Yeah, without interstate commerce, it's just like, I mean, of course there's illicit interstate commerce going on and backdooring and all this other stuff that like how could it not? There's not, you don't see giant, 1,000 pound bonfires of cannabis going off all the time. So
Yeah,
it's
and
got to go
Oklahoma's a
somewhere.
huge state, and like, I'm sure the Oklahoma people would like say it themselves. Like almost everybody we worked with, they'd be like, "I own my property. Tell them to come out here and tell me I can't do it." Like in Oklahoma, nobody wanted to pull permits. Nobody wanted to. Yeah, their buddies down the street were going to help them build whatever. So
Hmm.
for all the licensed stuff, who knows how much unlicensed work was also done that fed those markets.
For sure. Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think about. And with more states coming online all the time, there could be other potentials for something like that to happen where you have, a set cost of entry, right? Regardless of the size of the facility you want to build. So you can basically go in there with, like you're saying, like $10 million in capital, spend a tiny amount on the licensure and just blow up a space, and it would, and then, sure, you might have this spaceship to operate, but man, in a saturated market like that, it feels like, your talent pool is going to be diluted. Your overhead costs are gonna skyrocket after the short interval of time in which people realize that there's this tremendous demand for certain perishables and consumables that all of a sudden is going to be, they're going to deplete their stocks, they're going to have to restock all those things, and they're going to go, well, I'm going to up my price, why not? Like,
Well,
if
even
this many
even along
people
those
want it.
same lines, I feel like I had a handful of friends from Colorado all run out to Oklahoma because they couldn't legally
Hmm.
work in the industry here because they had felonies. So in Oklahoma, there was no regulatory whatever to who could run and operate these gardens. So I feel like there's
Yeah.
probably cultivators from all over sort of like our legacy
Yeah.
stuff, like we were saying out west, that were like, "Yo, here's my chance to get back in legally," and went there. So there were probably a bunch of talented guys running these gardens, that had that experience and were like able to pull off what they could walk the walk. And then sort of again, quickly, their dreams or what they were promised didn't work out. So then things turned to that gray area for a lot of
Yeah.
those projects.
Yeah, when and it's really fascinating because the people that I do see operating in Oklahoma still and like maintaining a certain amount of success are extremely small farms, like, 20 lighters, right? Like something where they're just pulling off 5 really good harvests a year, maybe pulling 50, 60 pounds out of it and then offering other sort of classes and educational material. And with the cost of living in Oklahoma being what it is, you can survive pretty comfortably off of, sub 100K income per year. And if you
Yeah,
already own the property or land, you're pretty comfortable.
some of our some really good friends, I guess, sort of guys from here, from College Denver, that went to Oklahoma. It's one of the larger, I guess, maybe sort of groups in Oklahoma. They're called Evo Cannabis. They
Oh,
put
I
out,
know Evoke. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, like Omid and Wes. I don't know, Omid's a real good homie. They put
Yeah,
out
Mead's a
really
friend.
good, cool. They put out really good work. And they've sort of been able to expand, and again, they started out more of like trying to do like an extraction sort of facility, extraction lab for like their facility, and then partnership
Yep.
didn't work out, and then we designed them their first 20,000 square foot spot. Then they just took it and ran, and did what they do.
Yeah.
And then they've expanded, and I feel like they're, I don't know. I guess you're sort of proud of your certain friends. You're like, y'all did it, like kind of thing, putting out
Yeah.
that type of work at that scale and stuff. So like, there are probably those other big examples similar to them, but I don't know. If I
For
was in
sure.
Oklahoma, that's what I'm going for.
Well, and they were such nice people when I met them. I met them over in in San Jose, California at a craft farmer meetup for talking about
Yeah, no,
crop
Omid was
steering.
there. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think it was Amit and his lead grower were there, and it was awesome to talk to them and hear what they were doing and how they like developed in Colorado and then took that to Oklahoma and were one of the more popular brands already on the shelves of the different dispensaries. And that sort of level of understanding all the different aspects of like compliance and um like the build out and everything, they were just, it seemed like they were able to go execute and get it into the market in such a good way that they it's cool to see something like that it's still around, because a lot of the brands kind of came and went like flashes in the pan.
yeah, totally. Yeah, so like we designed their spot with them, kind of thing.
Awesome.
They actually built. It's pretty cool. Like like when it comes to all your dosatron and like all of the plumbing, like we did all that plumbing design work for them. They actually built it themselves, kind of thing. Like getting pictures of them covered in the purple glue and stuff like that. Whatever. But again, like they built it themselves. So that's like a built, bought, not bought brand.
Yeah,
So like just I don't know, super proud of them, kind of thing. You're like sort of celebrate what they pulled off. Um, I guess sort of we still share a whole bunch of genetics with them. Kind of
I
thing. So
saw
like,
that actually. I was just talking to Amit the other day about the 8-inch bagel, and he was
yep,
saying that he got it from his buddy in Colorado. And then I saw it on your list of genetics that
yeah,
you offer. And this is actually a great segue into the next thing that I wanted to kind of touch base with you about and learn more about is the I Party with Jarret collection, your your
yeah,
genetics list that you curate. So tell us more about that and sort of what got that going and
sure.
where your
I guess
inspiration comes from.
I sort of always been I will call it a collector kind of thing. I think I started growing cannabis in like 2007, 2008, when I first moved here. Probably touch plants every day since, unless you like leave the country or something. And I feel like sort of when I first started, there was like sort of like two camps that I was like working with, kind of thing, if you will. One was a bunch of Southern dudes from Arkansas, like John and Chuck and G-Mac and Jason. They gave me my first plants and lights and stuff. And the other was, one of the bar owners and sort of his sensei master Q. So I was going to school and doing work for everybody, sort of like apprenticing under them, learning. And the guys from the South just always had better genetics and grew better weed than anybody else in town.
Well,
So like kind of like started to really get into it there. And I got a picture somewhere I could find it and send it to you. But like out of all the packages you would get from people, I would always pull a gram out and put it in a little Nalgene jar and label
uh-huh.
it. So at one point there was like 100 some different jars of different genetics that I bought and shared with friends and stuff like that, and I have them like all stacked up like a Jenga, you know, pile kind of thing. So I
Oh
just sort of
man.
always loved genetics kind of thing. Um, and then as you sort of do it a little bit longer and you start like keeping your own mothers instead of getting clones from friends, and then you sort of start getting into like popping seeds for yourself. So I feel like I was always a collector, just because like I don't know, I thought it was the fun, it's part of the fun part. And then as you start doing it more, you realize that that kind of is like one of the things that separates you and makes your product more memorable, and I guess sort of in some of the older days when you would have a couple passion projects yourself kind of thing, and everything's going and getting labeled, like um, when your work gets selected first. Part of it's because of the quality of the product. Part of it was because like diversity of genetics and like sort of I always had stuff that none of my friends had. Because I would go hunt stuff out. Um, and that's going back 16, 17 years ago. So fast forward, sort of came friends with another dude, chef in town, Johnny, like the knife is what we call him. And that's when it really started. Yeah, that's when we really started popping lots of seeds, kind of thing. Um, I still have this one strain called Cookie Wreck that I've had now since I think I popped that seed in 2011. Maybe shared it 3 times. I think it's like as special as something as I've ever worked with. But even back then, kind of started popping seeds and holding genetics, and sort of I would end up feeding all my friends' gardens clones, kind of thing. As far back then. So like, I guess going back to a little bit what Next Pick Crop does, we outfit these facilities, and then I would show up on site and sort of we'd have numbers that we'd have to hit right out of the gate to make everybody profitable. So started bringing my genetics with me so that I knew what I was doing, like right out of the gate.
Sure.
So sort of like those genetics were sort of just supplied to sort of clients or more of a private situation. And at this point, as things have loosened up a little bit, like, I'm like sort of holding, 50, 60, 80, 100 moms kind of thing to hold your whole library is a ton of work, kind
It
of thing when it
is.
just comes to all of it. People don't realize
We
how
hold
hard it
about
is. So,
120 right now
yeah,
at
you know,
the facility I'm at, and it's oh, it's a process.
yes, sort of repopulation, making sure you have enough stuff at the right time, all that. Um, so the whole I party with Jarret, I guess when we got all these trade shows, for all the cannabis trade shows, people are like, "Oh, what are we doing tonight?" I'm like, "Oh, we're gonna go party with these guys. We're gonna go party with the Canna team. We're gonna go party with whoever." So then somebody inside the company, actually a dude named John, he's one of the Grodan reps now. You should meet John as well. He's like, "Well, we're to a party with Jarret show." So then that's where that sort of name starts came from, and then sort of started joking about how I sponsor artists and athletes. Just people that are really cool. You're like they're part of the team. Um, but
Nice.
so basically back to it, so now sort of trying to do like here's my 18 strains kind of thing for the fall season, winter season, spring season. So you kind of like here's this menu. This is what's available now. We'll have a spring, we'll have a summer. So like every basically 3, 4 months that list changes to like the
Cool.
next set of 20 kind of thing. Sort of tried to set up a subscription program now kind of thing, just so we could be a little more prepared, as well as like our sort of clients can be prepared. So if somebody wants
Sure.
one strain every 90 days, they can sign up for that. Somebody wants 2 strains every 60 days. We have one person that wants 4 strains a month. So it's just like you almost have like your sushi menu, and you sort of like, you're signed up for X amount on whatever cadence and frequency. So you just sort of, this is what you're going to get every 60 days. You kind of get your cuts. So that like, the garden staff cultivation team can plan that they have, 2 new things coming in. The sales team can also then be prepared, the marketing team. So just to kind of try to get everybody like aligned in that, here's the new, this is what we're going to focus on. Not have to go pop all the seeds and hunt for themselves and all the work and question marks that comes with that. So like these are
For
proven
sure.
genetics that run in commercial facilities. Here's your COA, here's your pictures, here's your cheat sheet. Like, and sort of try to become
Right.
friends with all the guys at all the gardens. I feel like, are like I am, so it's like, here's my number, call me. I'll tell you however I can sort of help with like a little bit of growers notes. As well.
Right.
So it's sort of something we just sort of launched in January. Sort of seems like it's going pretty well so far. But it's just a way from where sort of all these cultivation teams to just be like, cool, I got two new strains coming in every 60 days, and then they can
Yeah.
sort of make their garden fresh with that. So
I really like that. I mean, it's also really beneficial to see from a commercial standpoint that it is commercially viable because, there are a lot of popular strains that you get in nowadays, like that you may be sourcing from someone who is some sort of uh, popular curator of flavors, and their style of growing might be, kind of what we touched on earlier. It might be this esoteric, unique, maybe they don't use like any sort of uh, substrate monitoring or anything, and they're using these massive pots and running their plants vegetative the entire cycle. And so that's how you get the morphology of the flower that they're sending you, but then you're putting it into a facility that's running small, like 1 gallon cocoa pots using substrate monitoring, high EC feed, and you're trying to match all of these other parameters that you're used to following. And it turns out into this, big old boof stick or something along those lines where it just doesn't work out in your parameters. But
Yeah.
by having someone like yourself who's also then connected to multiple facilities that are running different styles of growing that you've seen similar or the same cultivar run in already, you can provide super accurate data to people to say, listen, if you are running it in a small substrate, then you need to really drive your P2s for bulking, or
Yeah.
you really need to make sure that you're running a super generative environment all the way from start to finish, because it does not do well in high humidity mid flower, or just different things like that where you can really help people hone it in and not misstep when they intake new genetics. Because for
Yeah.
me, one of the biggest things is when running new genetics, I'll just throw like 9 plants in, right? Like 1 light worth of this
Yeah.
genetics,
Test light.
because I'm like, I'll test light it, but at the same time, sometimes when I see, you're by day 40 and you're like, this is bullshit. This is not working out. But you've already dedicated, 2 months to this plant, and you got to ride it all the way out, because at this point, you're not going to lose all the yield potential from all of that input and overhead that you've put into even that 1 light, because that's still in today's market a significant portion of a yield in some
It's a
cases.
real estate on the table, you know?
And so oh man, it's frustrating to take in genetics that then don't work out the way you want, or that you run them, let's say, outdoor, right? And then you're like, man, this yielded great for me outdoor. The returns on the hash were great. The terpene profile, the color, the structure, all did really well in an outdoor setting. You throw it indoors and it, you know,
I
throws
almost feel like
intersex
vice
traits,
versa. You
or
know, people have something that works great inside, and then they go outside with it and fill up hoop houses or fill up fields, and then all
yep,
of a sudden it doesn't do what they thought. You know, like,
for sure.
um,
I mean,
yeah,
both ways, right? It it
yeah,
it cuts both ways. You can't really necessarily take an outdoor and run it indoor, and you can't take an indoor and run it outdoor and expect the same things. Like sometimes they do work out, and there are strains that
yeah,
definitely do great, like uh, Super Boof, right? Indoor,
yeah.
outdoor, it does the same thing pretty much, and it's going to yield significantly for you. But something like what's one like some of the different grape strains,
Yeah.
you'll run it outdoor and it'll yield great, won't throw intersex traits, have, phenomenal terpenes and overall structure. Throw it indoors, you're seeding out your whole room. And it's
The other
frustrating.
sort of scary or whatever, you know, and like I've dealt with it. Anybody's like hasn't dealt with this yet. Question how much plant work you really do, but like all the viruses at this point that come with genetics and all the skeletons that come with them. We test regularly with Toomey Genomics out of Fort Collins. Dr. Tassa, like, you know, out of, they're just as kind of kind and great people. They're sort of on the cutting edge too of all like SOPs for HLBD testing and all of the others, you know, full panel, whatever else you want to do, you know, they'll take care of you. So we test stuff regularly with them. I guess sort of our mutual friend, Jesse Leach and Mothership Labs, like done full merisome dissections across the whole library. So it's like these plants have this vigor to them that's like
Sure.
really exciting. Even cutting branches, cutting clones off these plants that have come out of dissection. Like take your scissors and you go right through it, and you're like, this feels different, you know, kind of
Right.
thing. So I don't know, try to just have like I said, everything's tested, everything's been through meristem dissection. I don't know, just one of those things you're kind of like done everything we can to provide the people with something good.
Right. No, and I feel like all those different steps that you're taking to provide like clean genetics that are well tested, that have been proven in multiple environments, so you can kind of see how the phenotype changes over those different environments and the different operators and how they have their own unique kind of ways of dealing with things in the grow that produce different structures and morphologies. It's really helpful, and so
And to go
that's
back to
that's
what you
pretty
said
cool.
earlier, a little bit like sometimes people are like I run insert whatever or whatever nutrients this size container under these kinds of lights. And you're like, huh, we have a client that does the exact same thing. And like kind of here's pictures from their facility. So you really
Yep,
can kind of offer that sort of specifics to go along with them, to people. So it's, I don't know, that's sort of the new fun thing that we've been working on. Did some breeding work. Really excited to start popping a bunch of new seeds to sort of refill that list, with stuff that's going to be like one of one we've made in house. Just like you, I'm
for sure.
guessing you got a full fridge of seeds, more seeds than you should have, kind of thing. That
Probably.
you're really excited to get to, kind of thing as well. So I don't know, like I said, the list cycles about every 4 months. So that way that the people that have subscribed kind of thing, again, depending on the cadence that they want stuff, realistically that next list is going to have turned over and they get to pick off that menu again and sort of just try to keep everybody like fresh and excited about what's coming. And
For sure.
but at the same time, bring back like some of the older nostalgic stuff, like got like a pre 98 Bubba that's in dissection, a Durban poison in dissection, some of the old chem stuff. So yes, there's the new hype and whatever, but also like the building blocks of that nostalgic work, that sort of love and like I'm sure you're thinking the same thing too. Like if I could have this back, especially going back,
Right.
near a couple decades of work, there's certain things that have been lost for a while that you would do just about anything to have back at this point. So
For
hopefully at
sure.
this point, never losing anything again. Because we'll be able to store it on the shelf in a vessel.
Right. Yeah, it's the huge benefit of tissue culture. I I'm a huge advocate of it. It's come up so many times now on the show that, we've had Jesse on and we've had one of our
He's a wizard, but
he is great and he's super
yeah,
helpful. And then one of our co-hosts, Cosmic, he also does tissue culture at home so that he can maintain a large library for his
yeah,
breeding purposes. And I do tissue culture at work, and it's it's just one of those things that it is going to be a huge part of the industry. And for anybody that's still trying to push back against it, I'm gonna say, well, that your time's coming, and
yeah, yeah.
you're gonna learn.
It's one
But
of those
it's
things I feel like at this point too, like I don't know, I don't say it's like more inspiring than running the big gardens or whatever, but like there is something really cool about how specific and concentrated your work is. Like every knife stroke and
Mhm.
it's just so concentrated that like it really shows the quality of your work and how much attention to detail you pay to it. Because it's not like you're like, oh, that plant's gonna veg for 3 weeks or whatever, or you get to be a little bit sloppy and sort of make up for it.
Yep.
You're under a microscope doing like surgical work almost. So I just think it's really cool that it's like so specific and clean. And like, you put on your headphones and get under the hood and just like go to work and
Yep.
I don't know, you get in that tunnel and trance of it and sort of just love it. So
It's I mean, it is all propagation, right? But
yeah.
cloning for me is the same thing. I love doing clones, and making those that perfect tray of clones is really satisfying, similar
I
to like
judge people.
filling up
This
a
is one
bunch of
way I
vessels.
judge people. Like if I was going, if I'm going to hire somebody, one of the I feel like easiest ways to sort of see how good they are and like how consistent their work is, and like you're like, cut a tray of 50 for me, kind of thing,
Hmm.
and like sort of their clone work will really show how detailed or how sort of consistent or how much control they'll have of the entire garden. So if
Yep,
you're like, cut me, fill a tray, and that'll tell you just about everything you need to know about how talented somebody is in your garden.
for sure. I always look at the cutting board that they bust out, and if they have two lines on the cutting board, then I'm super happy.
Yeah. But just even like
And
just consistent, well, even just going back to
yeah,
like, getting into like the garden a little bit, you're like, like your mothers and the clones set the pace for the rest. You have such like sort of specific timelines and deadline, kind of thing to everything in your garden that if your clones are slow out of the gate, it's an uphill battle. Like, I always sort of joke, like, you start at 100%, kind of thing. And every little mistake, you go down from 100 to 98 to 94 to whatever, and you
right.
never get to go back up. So it's
Nope,
like, how few mistakes can you make, and how can you hit like all those apex turns that you're chasing, throughout this round? So it's just, how far forward are you always planning, looking, thinking? And it really starts with how good are your clones. That's like,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yep. And Yeah, I feel like that's a great way to break it down for people, even for home growers too, where if you're looking at, the potential for your garden, you need to definitely start with 100%. And, if your clones aren't that great, then you already need to say, well, I'm not going to have the best harvest I possibly can.
Yeah,
And if
it
you accept
creeps
that,
down.
then you can still work within the parameters that you're using, right? Let's say your genetics just aren't that great, or you don't have a veg space that's able to be dialed in well. So you're always,
Yeah.
through some environmental parameter having some sort of nutrient deficiency or other health issue with the plants. Well, that's what you get to work with. So let's just go from there. And I feel like a lot of times when people are trying to optimize their space, uh, they miss that point where it's you have to work with what you have, but sometimes what you have isn't ideal and you can still do really well with it. But knowing how to then kind of pivot around those
Yes.
issues is something that does take a lot of time and practice and patience.
Yeah, like to your point here, sort of, I guess this is like a two-part answer to this. In my like teacher days, there's something at the one school I was teaching at, they would call it like two kisses and a wish. And I feel like this is like my biggest takeaway from being a teacher. After you sort of finish these projects or assignments, the whole class would go around and like, every student would like, one student would sort of essentially not be in the center of the circle, but like their work would be on center stage. And the whole class would go around and sort of, give them two kisses and a wish, like two things that they did well and one thing that they could improve on. So I feel like that was like one of the biggest takeaways for me because it's like hard to sort of accept criticism in that way from peers at times or but like in the garden you really need to like as far forward planning as you can be, to put out fires 3 months down the road. Um, and you don't want to dwell on mistakes and stuff from the past, but you need to connect those dots and reflect back to really understand where that hiccup came from and how I can, like, okay, that happened this time because of, let's say, your environmental conditions or, you don't have the proper irrigation set up. So how do I now connect that dot backwards to plan forwards um, that it's all going to kind of
Right.
come together? Um, so I don't know, like, reflection is really important. You can't dwell on stuff and let it bring you too far down when you like have these hiccups or mistakes. You do need to reflect and sort of how do I improve and connect those dots so then that your plan going forward, is improved and
Yeah.
more optimal than it was before.
Absolutely. And, looking back at where those hiccups may have started is kind of a puzzler's dream. If you like to
Yeah.
puzzle and if you like to do anything sort of like mentally, like a mental gymnastic sort of practice or a mental exercise, then by looking back and trying to puzzle this together and figure out where you had an issue, you're going to be able to learn so much more than just by trying to prevent everything from ever happening. And by having, it's a great trait in the garden to be able to problem solve, right? Because problems arise all the time. We're dealing with living plants. It's inevitable. There's bugs, there's pathogens, there's environmental conditions, there's electrical failures, there's other equipment failures. All of this can go wrong. And rather than freaking out and saying that piece, that one little piece of the puzzle fell away, how do I can't do anything about it because I needed that piece to finish the puzzle. You have to say, well, this is kind of going back to what we've talked about before. You're now operating at 95%. So you need to bring everything down to match that. Otherwise, you're going to hurt the plants by, so you can't have the room cooled down far enough when you're putting that much wattage in the room. Well, guess what? You can't run your lights at 100% anymore. You got to make sure that you're cycling your dehues properly so you're not dumping all that extra BTU into the room as well. All these different things that you can then sort of dial those down to match your new baseline
Yeah.
because of something that isn't working properly or because you just don't have the ability to have it work properly. And so, yeah, it's with so much of like gardening in general, you have to be able to pivot on the spot and be able to adapt to what changes in the garden. And so, yeah,
Now too, these days with all the data, like every sensor in the world that we run and all this data, it's kind of like, I guess in the old days, like, you used to have like the big desktop calendars everywhere, and you would, back, like you click your little thermometer for high and low and for temperature, humidity, this was my pH, this was the EC, like, you would write all of those inputs in daily for everything you did. And then like, I don't know, mine too would have like what concerts I was going to or what, so it really told the story of, uh, that round kind of thing. So you could look back and you're like, oh, well, you went on tour for a week or two, so you could see like the fluctuations of certain things to connect those dots. But now we have
Right.
sensors and stuff like that and alerts on your phone or your computer, so like kind of like turn it into, I don't want to say muscle memory, but like, like we're saying, like this reactionary, my DQs can't handle this. Like, well, what are you going to do to now sort of make it so your DQ can? Like whether it's adjusting
Right.
temperature and raising your temps or trying to spread the irrigation out in a certain way or less plant, again, what good decisions can I make for what's in front of me? And this kind of thing, like,
Yep.
just sort of have to like just be comfortable to like call that audible, but you still have to follow the plan, because uh, the whole point is to have a plan that works, kind of thing. So, but
Right.
again, one of my buddies is another consultant. He's like, dude, anybody could buy SOPs and they work. Sometimes like people like us are real important when it becomes like those emergency procedures. Like that's what you sort of are buying, um, is us to help you solve on the fly. Like, I don't know, it's
Right.
one of my favorite parts. You're like how creative as you can be to solve is sort of how much you get out of it. So I like love that creative problem solving um,
For sure. Yeah,
part of
I
it.
was a chef for like 10 years, and part of, being a chef is problem solving because you have to make sure that your budget works or your
What
menu
server
has
didn't
this,
ring
that,
this
or,
in and you need it on the fly? Da, da, da. Like, like that's the
right?
fun
And
part
you have to
probably in the
pivot.
line. Yeah.
Yep,
And
constantly.
that
And
and
so
that
it
shows
it
who's
helps a
that
lot in
good.
the
You're like,
garden.
yeah, add another pan or cook this, but like I don't know, that shows how good you are. Is like, cool, I have all this normal stuff in front of me, but now I
Right.
have to add this and this and this and do it as fast as I can. I don't know, I think
Well,
that
and
that's
so
cool to show how much in control are you that you can do it.
right. And one of the biggest lessons that you learn is redundancy, because you need to be able to if something fails, you need to be able to continue to execute.
Sorry, I have a little foster puppy over here. Not little.
All good.
Yeah.
No worries.
No, but yeah, like you said, the redundancy, man, like it's one of those things that like all your mise en pause in a row, like, like be prepared, like kind of thing. Like, and then when stuff does go a little sideways, like hang in there with it and solve.
Right. Exactly.
Hey, Phil. Sorry, UPS guy's out front.
No
Phil.
worries.
There you go. Go.
Well, I think we've had a great little intro into what you do with Next Big Crop, and sort of the I Party with Jarret collection and everything that you're doing there in your sort of professional life. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like your partnership with Next Big Crop is kind of leading up a lot of the cultivation aspects of the group that you're with, because of your experience with growing and cultivating, and helping other growers out when you were working at the gardening store. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, myself, like, yeah, like you sort of joked about earlier, like nobody's ever going to buy a computer from me. Um, Christian, my one partner, comes from like the finance world kind of thing. So if like Excel spreadsheets where you could compete in them, he would do really well. Kind of thing. Like he's a numbers and organized as can be, and just like extremely good at like the project management aspect and keeping everybody accountable and in row. And if this gets backed up, we didn't order these, you know, whatever, air conditioning unit, or we didn't order this at time. So that moves everything back on like the project management and the build out charts. Everything's moved back 3 weeks now because of this. And so Christian does like, I couldn't do what he does when it comes to sort of that project management and like financial stuff. Then my other partner, Rich, he actually founded Next Big Crop in like 2012 or 14, or, what feels like forever ago. He sort of has a construction and a landscaping background, and he built one of the first greenhouses in Boulder as like a construction. worker, and then next thing you knew, he was running it. So he sort of has a construction and cultivation background as well. He ran a
Oh,
bunch of
cool.
spots as well. And then that's when he started doing the application writing, and that's sort of where Next Big Crop came from um, as a whole. So, I couldn't do what either of them do for sure, kind of thing. I would also dare them to try and come play with plants and do, kind of one of those things like, it's sort of at this point, like all these projects are just honestly like too big for any one person. Like there's no unicorn out there that can do it all. So sort of to like have that complementary team where everybody's sort of a subject matter expert in their lane. Don't get me wrong, we all wear lots of hats,
Sure.
and solve and whatever, but like to sort of have that comfort spot of like, where you hang out, this is your world, you got to own it and you got to be just on all of it. So sort of next big crop, like I said, we have lots of clients, pretty much almost every state that, legal markets working in, design facilities, sort of sold gear, sold genetics to, helped with operational plans or financial models and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I feel like sort of the network we've built, between vendors and clients is like something to be proud of. Just kind of like you can walk in any room with your head high, done
Definitely.
everybody right kind of thing over the years.
For sure. Well, I mean, considering your vast background in dealing with the cannabis plant, um, we I do like to find out sort of where you started your journey with plants in general. So, whether that be when you were younger, growing up, if there was a garden in the backyard, or, some people say that cannabis is the gateway plant to gardening, and sometimes it's the other way around for people. So, where did your journey with plants begin?
Sure. So my mother is like as talented of as an artist as like you can be, kind of thing. Like she was an art teacher. When she was younger, she ran a clothing company, sort of designed clothes and all kinds of stuff there. Um, Sort of quilting, like drawing, painting, all of it, photography. But I guess she always had like a vegetable garden at her house growing up. So she literally would walk across a creek to the other side of the field to garden, pick all of whatever, and that was dinner for her. She just ate salads constantly. And I'll send you some pictures of it. Like they just moved to Asheville, North Carolina a couple years ago. I lived in Philly my whole life. But she has a couple bird of paradises that are probably like, I think one's like 43 years old, the other's 30 something. She has a few other plants that are 50 plus years old that, she's
Wow.
been carrying around. Like at this point, she has to hide stuff from my dad when she brings home new plants, kind of thing. She's probably got 500 plus like cactuses, succulents, cacti,
Oh,
succulents, like
that's so cool.
kind of thing. And I'll send you pictures. It's like pretty stunning work, kind of like how do you know the Latin names for all this stuff? So I feel like I didn't really realize it, like how, when you're younger, you don't realize certain things of it. But like they said, she had plants that are, the house I grew up in, like one of the rooms, like big glass windows, and it was 2 stories tall without a second floor above it. So she had 20 some foot tall plants my whole life, kind of thing.
So
Um,
you grew up around plants.
yes, but I didn't really, I guess to be honest, I used to mow lawns like from the time I was like, I don't know, maybe 11. I was mowing lawns to make money to buy dirt bikes. So like didn't really
Okay.
realize it, kind of thing. But like, back when I was a kid, I could tell you all kinds of stuff about skag, whatever, insert whatever lawn, we had Kubota tractors, whatever, kind of stuff like whatever. Just didn't really maybe realize it till older that maybe that's where it all started.
Sure.
Um, and then, like I said, when I got this job, and I guess sort of always sort of self-medicated my whole life pretty regularly kind of thing. So then like, I started bartending at that one bar and they sort of drug me up the hill to get trim for them. And then you're like, I want my own plant. So I lived in this little carriage house, um, tiny little carriage house like in the city. And I was teaching whatever. So I literally moved my mattress to the staircase. So it was like up against the staircase. And then I hung a tarp and I hung 2000 watts on one side and then I had a little bedroom with some just T5s. So I moved all my clothes down into my living room and kitchen and I literally slept on a mattress next to 2000 watts and did that for a while, I guess until I got robbed, and then that's like a whole new learning experience kind of thing. And then I got robbed and sort of freaked out. You're like, you know, It's sort of one of the, Q, like the one sort of sensei master mentor that is, we could talk about him, you know, s- he's a sensei kind of thing. He is so far ahead of his time. He was part of a project up in Netherlands that he wanted out of. Um, and he was kind of just like, why don't you, he told the guys, his partners, why don't you bring Curly up? And they used to just call me Curly. And so then I started going up the hill and like sort of said, like I never really grew any plants until I started growing cannabis. And then I went from two lights, with my mattress next to that tarp here and those white shoe boxes hum all night to
Mm-hmm.
10 to 14 to three houses, next thing kind of as sort of many houses and I guess like I was finishing my teaching degree. Like I said, it was the first time I went through college was like B and C student. I bartended and partied and had a real good time. But when I was getting my teaching degree and started growing, I got a 4.0 kind of thing. Like all of a sudden it was like the first time you ever had a with those big desktop calendars. It was the first time I ever had a schedule that I guess I followed. So
And it
like
worked.
all of a sudden, school clicked. I got a 4.0, graduated with whatever high honors from, like that's kind of stuff. And like I said, kind of just, I think like a lot of people, it almost gets addictive kind of thing to have these gardens and trying to make something so pretty and, just it's like a very creative outlet, where you
For
get to
sure.
take something from being like, a small little plant to this final finished flower. I feel like probably like lots of other people, in our world great at starting stuff and not finishing stuff projects. And this was like the first thing that ever
Been there.
clicked. Yeah, this was the first thing that ever clicked that like I followed through and in that way and like finished hard and and just got super proud of your work and
Nice.
like I said, that's now 17 years later, kind of thing. But
How
um,
how was that first grow set up though? Like, so you said you had just like a tarp kind of separating the room out, but
yeah, so
what was like your inputs? What were you feeding these plants? How did you what
yeah, so basically
was
there
it a
was
successful first grow?
we'll call it medium.
Medium.
Kind of like so it was like a little carriage house with like your sort of sloped roof and a little
Hmm.
tiny staircase that went upstairs. And there was a tiny little bathroom with like a sliding curtain kind of thing. So I had a mattress up against the stairs, and I used to have to fill up 5 gallon buckets, in the shower and like walk across my mattress to get to the plant, kind of thing. Like
Okay.
literally, it was like and there was like a little fireplace or there was a chimney in the middle of this space. So I took a hammer and beat a hole in that chimney to try to exhaust everything out of. So I literally
Okay.
had the T5, sort of tarps down on floors and hung. And like I guess at that point we were using like the Dutch bleach trays, like the little, the 6 inch Grodan slabs,
Okay.
kind of thing. So I think in the beginning it was on Ionic, which I think it's Australian, but Ionic was a one part, recipe. Your veg and your bloom and like a little PK booster and so just basically had little recirculating pumps, with those leach trays and the slabs. So like I said, I slept next to these plants with, the lights going at night and, you know, the upstairs in a little tiny carriage house with no insulation in the middle of the city. Um,
Were you
so
doing like ebb and flow? Were you doing like an ebb and
no, I
flow
had like a
system or
little
just like
we had like a little like your cement mixing bins you get at Home Depot or Lowe's kind of thing. I think they were 11 gallons a piece, and just like a
all right?
little pump with some drip stakes, drip line going up to
Cool.
each slab kind of thing. And it was, I guess, because these guys, used to do big houses up in the mountains, so it'd be 2 plants of light just to keep the counts under 99, and so I just basically mimicked that at my house kind of thing.
Oh,
Um,
so
uh,
you did 4 plants under 2,000 watts?
yeah, kind of, and I
That's
feel like, so,
nice.
dude, it was, and again, the guys I was getting genetics from, like Chuck and John and them, like, it was as good of, like, we'll get into this, but like, if I could have that cut of sour diesel back, from back then, I would do anything for, it is the best sort of cut that I've ever touched that I've lost.
Do you
Um,
remember what specific cut of sour diesel it was?
Again, this is coming back like the 14 to 17 year mark here in Denver kind of
Sure.
thing. So I don't, they just always just referred to it as the D, and they're from the South with big old beards and big dudes like, oh, the D, whatever, like kind of thing. So I wish I knew what cut, it has been long gone kind of thing. And I have
I'll
been
have
searching
to
ever since kind of,
I'll have to connect you with one of the well with my co-founder with the the Craft Growers Network, Gabby, because
I got my eyes all over that. I can't wait to get to meet him and go mess with that kind of thing.
yeah, because he's got a few different sour cuts that one of them might be the one that you're looking for. Because I
Yes,
think a
his
few of them
list
are
is
like
super
18,
impressive.
19 years old. Hmm.
Yeah, his list is impressive. Yeah, kind of thing. So I can't wait to trade, collaborate, do whatever kind of thing with him to get my hands on it. So
Cool.
these guys also used to have this Hawaiian that was like just like I said, I would only smoke the like during like midterms or finals. I would only smoke the Hawaiian because I would joke, instead of smoking dope, I would smoke smart with that Hawaiian, and it was
Nice.
kind of thing. So like I don't know, but yeah, it's going back a while, and then yeah, so like it was Ionic for a while, and then that was sort of the one team's recipe, and then the Southern guys were all on GH, and it was you know, like I said, they're a bunch of Southern boys. So it was like, we talking shot glasses of green, purple, pink, like your General Hydroponics 3-part. So
Hell yeah.
like, like those recipes were written in certain ways from them, and then I guess they introduced me to the guys at Chlorophyll here in town, which is no longer around, but like Bo and Lee definitely like educated me too. And so I feel like super righteously like thankful that I sort of had like the teachers and mentors I did because they were kind of like as good as sort of came up on like teams where these guys really, and I guess even back then, like I started joking, like, well, in the name of science, and like, you would have trash cans with reservoir, kind of thing. One of the next setups after that one that I loved, we had built out a warehouse in Boulder, and it was a 10,000 square foot warehouse, and it was all 8-inch PVC pipe, and they cut the tops out of it and had little handles, like kind of thing in them. So they'd be like 40-foot runs to mimic the Dutch leach trays, kind of thing with the
Okay.
8-inch PVC on just sawhorses, and they had big horse troughs as reservoirs at the end of it, kind of thing. So like three of us could run this 10,000 square foot warehouse. It was so basic and simple like that. So then like after that one got broken down, I stole a bunch of the 8-inch pipe for my house, kind of thing. But I would even
Nice.
run like, the exact same strains, 4,000 watts in the basement. So you like, two 8-inch pipes on one side, two 8-inch PVC pipes on the other side with different reservoirs with the exact same genetics, but different, nutrients and stuff like that. So
Okay.
even back
Started running some side by sides and
15,
stuff to see the difference.
yeah, just I don't know. I guess like I love cars and motorcycles, so I feel like, sort of I don't know, I always look at it as like race car shit, and like
Sure. Yeah, you're
kind of
racing.
thing, like, this versus that, and like, you were writing down the recipes and all this stuff, and everything was comparable. So it was just like, you're sort of competing with yourself to just see where you could take it. But
When you were running those 8-inch pipes, were you still using like a drip system and just letting that be sort of your trough to drain to waste?
yeah, basically, you put your little culver like half-inch or 3/4 inch, like sort of PVC down it, so it hold your slabs up, like off the ground kind of thing, and just put the
Uh huh.
slabs right all the way up. It's like, if you could imagine big warehouses full, just sawhorses and 8-inch PVC, like so simple,
That
kind of
is.
thing. And again, like I don't know, like the simplicity of it. It's like race car stuff. Like it's like and I love like sleeper cars. Like you don't want to advertise anything, but you want to be real fast. So I always look at
Yeah.
like the same kind of thing. It was like 8-inch PVC. It was designed to hold water and move water. That's what we were doing in it. And you sort of cut it, design it, make it work in that space. And like I don't know, it was so simple, but yet it worked so well, kind of thing.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I mean, sometimes the best systems are those that are the simplest to use because you don't have to there's no guesswork, and then if anything fails, it's as simple as, busting out the sawzall and cutting the
Yeah,
pipe off and throwing in a new piece. It's
just all
easy.
form and function, nothing to look cool. Like just, it is truly like, performance designed kind of mentality. Don't get
For
me wrong,
sure.
like we get bored over the years and you'd be like, I'm gonna do organic, I'm gonna switch to this, whatever, So like you've done it, and working your way to grow, like, you work there at the store, you put your, 8 or 10 hour shifts in and you just read every bottle on the shelf kind of thing and like make up fantasy recipes, or you get to like essentially watch all your customers buying all this stuff and who does really good work and cherry pick these ideas from them and stuff. So like, I've run like every nutrient, you could imagine, all the different substrates, the different size containers, what like I said, in the name of science, it was just like fun to like practice and put it all together.
Well, let's do like a little fun mental exercise then,
Sure.
since you have this experience with all the different nutrients and all these different setups. If you were to help a home grower set up a 4x4 tent, right?
Yep.
With and let's talk hydroponics because organics and stuff
Yeah.
is more of a religion to a lot of the
Yes.
people that grow that
Passion.
way rather
Yeah.
than a practice. And I feel like if that's the route of growing that someone wants to go, I wholeheartedly support it. But it's really hard to say that this is, from someone who sold the different inputs and the different aspects of growing. It's hard to be like, this is exactly what you need to do to be successful. But with hydroponics, in a lot of cases, there's, there's different recipes, there's different forms and functions of the different hydroponic systems that you can use that kind of require either a tweak here or a change there. So if you were to help someone set up a 4x4 tent, what nutrients are you going for? What style of hydroponics are you helping them set up? And what are some of the things that you think you might be able to help alleviate in terms of the struggles of hydroponics, whether it be like runoff capture or nutrient delivering or tank mixing or anything like that? Just kind of run through if you had to design your own 4x4
Sure.
tent at home right now.
I guess so we'll sort of start, kind of obviously LED light at this point, just because, you know, temperature control, electric, all of this stuff kind of thing for, that's such a small space. I don't know, like love Fluence lights, love Gavita lights, ran DLI lights for a while. Like those are my top three kind of lights. Like any of those, you have like as good a fixture as you could get. I don't know, I guess starting to mess with some BIOS lights as well. Um, I haven't run them yet, but like about to start playing with their under canopy stuff.
Cool.
So get your sort of your standard bar style LED. I guess when it comes to nutrients, I feel like it's a pretty no-brainer for me. I'm on Team Canna, kind of thing. Like, um, there's an A and a B kind of thing to it. It's always equal parts of A and B. So it's like you could kind of do it with your eyes closed, or
Sure.
like the answer is more or less, kind of thing, and they both go up and down at the same time. So when you look at your plants and you're like, do it, color or this or whatever, the answer is more or less. So like,
And they have an
I
AB
probably
veg and an AB flower, right?
yes, but also for their cocoa line, the cocoa specific nutrient line, it's the same for veg and flower kind of thing. So for a home grower, you literally could get your cocoa A and your cocoa B, and it's the same nutrient for veg and flower, which would be super convenient. Like I love, like I said, I don't know, I kind of love these compressed cocoa blocks at this point. They're so just consistent and easy and no mess and no pots to wash at the end. Just, you get all of like, the commercial part, like, is there a virus in there? Oh, you didn't wash your pot good enough. Now you just spread it to your next plants. What? Yeah, so these compressed cocoa blocks sort of eliminate all of that and the labor and stuff. So like in your little 4x4 tent, like I guess I always like to sort of think of it as like pattern on a dice, when it comes to your plant arrangement. You could do four, you could do five, you could do nine, kind of thing. But like the pattern on a dice kind of is like how we'll set those plants up to sort of have just like that sort of even space management. So that all of our plants, ideally, you could take any one plant and put it to another spot, and they're all the same shape, and you could switch them, and nobody would ever know.
Hmm.
Because that sort of shows your control. So like four plants, five plants, or nine plants in that. I guess you could do eight too, but um, in that 4x4. And again, I can of cocoa. They have their like Cocoa Flex pots now, and I have like a 1 gallon and a 3 gallon. So I don't know. I love the smaller ones. So I would stay in that 1 gallon pot, and I would build myself, outside your tent. Get yourself like that 55-gallon drum or 20-gallon trash can, whatever, kind of thing. And sort of the correct pump. You got to do a little bit of math when it comes to pumps, just to make sure the pressure's right. But get your pressure compensating like Netafim drippers so that every plant's getting the exact same amount of feed. So like can and I guess the other thing is like I picked it's been this way for years and years too, but like you know there's certain bottles that I used to love that I don't use anymore just for like cleanliness purposes. But sort of like a synthetic liquid nutrient, like can of cocoa, the reservoir is always clean, the drip lines are always clean. Like, so like you always sort of you don't have to worry about that certain maintenance kind of thing. So like,
Right.
A and B, you have your PK booster, you could run a little hypochlorous acid or whatever, but you really don't, don't get me wrong, years ago I used to have 15-part recipes and stuff like that.
Right.
I'm sure, but now it's kind of like, A, B, maybe some CalMag, depending on where you live and well water, city water, whatever, or RO stuff. But like the hardest thing I think to teach somebody, especially for a home grower, what is wet and what is dry if you don't have the
Mm,
sensors kind of thing. Like so as long as your environment is in that sort of window of VPD that's going to be happy, kind of thing, like you don't need too many parts of nutrients to really put out stellar product. The answer is like what is wet and what is dry. And kind of like, again, just keep it between the lines. You don't have to be perfect, just, but like, so I go like, pick your LED light, some can of cocoa nutrients of the same veg and flower newts in a 1 gallon pot with a drip, and then you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever and get your little 6 gallon waste runoff, kind of like cement mixing bin, and that can catch your wastewater and you could, go water your house plants or whatever outside with it kind of thing. If you
for
wanted to
sure.
reuse it, you certainly could, but like I would keep it simple like that, and then I'd also focus on make sure you have genetics that you're stoked and excited about. They're going to give you the product in the end that you want, but like it's that simple kind of
For
thing.
sure. So a few questions then, in your
Yeah,
opinion, seed or clone for a first grower?
clone. I guess
I
like
agree.
hopefully, hopefully you have a friend that can kind of coach you along and help you out, and they'll give you those first couple clones. So they've grown it, then they could tell you the little bit of the cheat sheet with it. If you kill it or mess it up, who cares? They're going to give you a new one, kind of thing.
For sure.
So I would say, get clones from a buddy. So you got a friend, you got a mentor. They're gonna like coach you along. It's fun, that kind of thing.
Right on. Yeah, I agree. Clones are kind of always what I would suggest to people when they're starting off because you can look and see where what it's produced in other settings and have a goal that you can
Yeah,
have as your target. Whereas seeds are just a lot more hit and miss. No matter how good the breeder is, it's one of those things where there is no uniformity in cannabis breeding right now that you can't plant a field of cannabis seeds at this point and expect for there to be a true uniformity across that entire crop. So
yeah.
when you're
Plus, if you
only
loved it,
popping
you
a
get to
couple
get
at
it
home,
back. Yeah.
say that again.
Plus, if you love it, you're like, cool, let's do it again. Same strain.
Yeah,
How do
exactly.
I do it better this time? What improvements am I? So it gives you that ability to baseline and continue to make good decisions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that. And then, so like I always suggest for people that are starting off with hydroponics to just run a single set of irrigations per day where they reach field capacity, achieve some runoff, and then allow for a dry back over the remainder of the day and through the nighttime. And with that in mind, is that something that you would suggest for new growers as well, or would you suggest something slightly different?
I don't know. I guess it's one of those things of like, there's no like one correct answer here, obviously. It's kind of
Right.
like I would almost say like pick that philosophy you're going to follow, that methodology from the start and follow it all the way through. If you want to get cute and play with like your sort of irrigations and like push it that way, you start that way from day one and you follow that plan. If you want to push that one big sort of scheduled feed or, kind of as the plant needs it. And then you're not going to water again until the plant is ready to accept. Follow that the whole way through, kind of thing. But I would say, I don't think there's a right answer here. It's kind of
Sure.
what do you want to learn from? And then you have to stick with that the whole way through to like, prove it to yourself what you learned. So,
For sure.
again, maybe we
Consistency.
could, we could get cute and start talking like, kind of where do you live? Like, what's the humidity? Like, Colorado's dry. This is, so certain other factors might lead one of those decisions to being a better decision than another. But again, I would just say, pick one and
Absolutely.
learn from that and follow the plan.
Absolutely. I really like that. Consistency is key in a lot of aspects, and your plants, especially when they're on drip irrigation, they're going to if they're getting consistent irrigations daily or at a specific volumetric water content, let's say like where it dries back to a specific number and then boom, it triggers an irrigation event. As long as you're triggering it consistently at whatever set point that is, the plants are going to tend to respond positively to that. And so yeah, I suggest doing the one set of irrigations events per day and doing that all the way through, because then they'll see this extremely generative, and I think the morphology of the plant tends to be very desirable in that aspect, and then people can start to mess with how they want to manipulate their yields. But or if it's at a specific dryback point, making sure that you just hit it with the irrigation then, all those things I think work really well. What EC and what pH would you suggest for people if they're running the Canna nutrients?
I don't know. You could probably just always stay safe and just be like 6 point, kind of thing, plus or minus whatever. But like, your six is just like we'll hang out right there in the middle, kind of thing. And I guess
On the
in all
pH?
honesty, yeah, pH. Sorry, 6 point or pH. And when it comes to like sort of EC at this point, you know, what we used to do 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, 15 years ago, kind of thing, is very different than sort of what people are currently doing. Um, again, all the sort of different nutrient manufacturers, like, Canna, Athena, Front Row, GH, whatever, like all of them have their recommendations kind of thing. But again, I think it's going to go back a little bit to like, how many watts is your light? Do you have a par meter? What is your reading at Canopy?
Do you have
Kind of thing.
CO2?
Do you have CO2? So sort of some of these other factors are going to swing that. But just to play it safe and sort of straddle a fence, like you could probably hang out at like a 2.0 EC the whole time and be pretty comfortable. You're not leaving something on the table kind of thing. But you are pushing hard enough to get that desired result. And
Sure.
again, like sort of different nutrients, sort of concentrations and, um, you know, all situations are different, but basically, if you sat at a 6.0 pH and a 2.0 EC, you could probably go hang out and be super comfortable throughout a whole run.
For sure. I think that's a great answer, especially for new growers and especially if they're not providing any supplemental CO2. And, within that same line of thought, keeping all the other environmental and lighting factors at an acceptable level
Yeah.
rather than trying to push them to the nth degree. Um, because at that point there are going to be different nutrient packages that need to be increased in order to make sure that the metabolism of the plant is operating at its full potential with the photosynthetic potential of the light that you're providing to it. And so all of those factors, it's like the Liebig's law. You have your limiting factors within like the staves of a barrel. So if as long as you're raising them all up together and going little bits at a time on all of them to make sure that nothing spills over, you should be able to achieve a pretty optimal result for your situation.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Well, I think that was fun to
Yeah.
tell people a little bit about how they might how someone with your experience might set up a new home grow, and I
One of
feel
the
like
random
that's
other things, if
valuable.
possible, doing this little home grow, if you could set yourself up, like this is one thing I feel like I've pushed on a couple of friends over the, like if you could set yourself up a 4x8 tent, but really only have one light in it so that you can contain everything inside there, you know, you don't have to worry about stuff spilling.
Yep,
You could fit, if you had to fit a little portable air conditioner or
for
humidifiers
sure.
or whatever kind of other factors. If you had the space to put a 4x8 tent, but truly only put one light in it, but put all of your other environmental controls in there, like that's the styly way to like do
Absolutely.
some killer work in a small space like that.
For sure. It's like the step up from a lung room, but right before you
Yeah.
actually meet a fully sealed environment. So you can still do passive intake or exhaust or even active intake or exhaust and something like that if you need to, because like yeah, you could have maybe an AC inside the tent, but you need to exhaust the AC still at that point if it's like a
Yes.
standing one, or you cut a hole in it and you stick it up against a wall where you already have a wall mounted AC or something like that, and then you're still having some sort of air exchange. And I've seen all sorts of different styles of that, but I
Yep.
do really like the idea of having a 4x8 or a 5x10 with just one light. You have a
Yep.
lot of room to work around your plants. You can even center that light in the tent so you
Totally.
have an extra like 3 feet and 2 feet on either side, and you can get to all different sides of your plant really easy that way.
Yeah.
It's a great way to learn. I think that's
Plus,
a
it also containing
valuable.
smell, containing spillage of water, sort of all of those things. Plus, like while you're working in there, you could watch the humidifier kick on, or you hear an exhaust. Kind of it's like it's one of those things that's just it turns the same thing that we do in these big buildings now, just to a smaller scale kind of thing. So you get to like see how this turns on, this turns off, like just all the moving parts, pulling levers, and how it all works. So.
Absolutely. I think that that's a great advice for new growers, especially if they have the ability to and the space, right? Because there's, a little bit of overhead cost that you got to deal with there. And then the space of a 4x8 tent is significant if you're in like a small apartment or
Yeah,
something.
totally.
So all these different factors need to be taken into account. But, if for an ideal, one light setup, that sounds awesome. Like a lot of people I think would be able to hit the ground running and succeed, on their first however many harvests that they get out of something like that if they're
And you could do
paying
quite a bit of
attention.
work out of that little space. Like,
Oh yeah. I mean,
you're not really, yeah.
you're probably, if you're doing everything correctly, you're easily pulling 12 to 15 pounds out of that space per year. And if
Yeah.
that's just for your own consumption at home and you're going through more than a pound a month, then you might need to slow down a little
I
bit.
don't know. I'd be impressed, but yeah, whatever, that kind of thing.
For sure. Um, well, let's see. So we've touched base on your background, what you do at Next Big Crop. Um, let's talk about some of the current things and current projects that you're working on, and maybe some of the things that you've seen within the cannabis industry that you either might want to see change or see move in a certain direction. Like, what are some of the trends that you're seeing and things that you're currently experiencing through your consultation services?
Sure. So I guess like one of the, like I said, we kind of have projects, um, every, lots of markets kind of thing, even at this point, like internationally kind of thing. So that's like something shiny, and fun to talk about and dream about and stuff like that, hoping it gets closer. Yeah. Been working on one project in Costa Rica for almost 3 years now. So that's real close to getting across the finish line and can't wait. Um, but I guess sort of certain things I see in the market these days. One of the things I guess like the hardest thing as a consultant sometimes is to like come in and sort of try to prove to like the team that you're coming in to work with. You're like, yo, dude, I don't want your job. Like I'm not here for your job, kind of thing. Like I'm here to help you solve stuff and sort of get in and get out, kind of thing. So like it's a dance and like trying to figure, you got to become friends with the cultivation team. You got to sort of put your time in the trenches a little bit and show that like, yo, I've done this. I'm gonna work right alongside with you to help solve this, kind of thing. Like I win when you solve problems and get better, kind of thing. So like that's like, one of the biggest and like most immediate obstacles like everywhere you go. Sort of like I don't know. I'm gonna sort of probably maybe upset some people with like saying, but there's just like certain things that are just unrealistic. Like when it comes to like sales teams and accounting stuff and whatever spreadsheets, you're like, bro, like your spreadsheet's not real. Like, so sort of again bringing those expectations back to reality, and then kind of thing. It's like, you know, people want something that tests this high that finishes this fast, and and like it sort of just puts like unrealistic goals or like objectives in front of everybody, which then causes like teams to clash. The garden's like,
Sure.
I need more time or I need more money or I need whatever, to make this happen. And so it's sort of like it's sort of hard to, and then certain people have like certain egos that are like, sort of hard to work around kind of thing. And like um, and again, like lots of it's opinion based, like this is flowers impressive, this could be better, whatever, So like I don't know, it's just I wish there was a little bit more. I don't know, I guess like I said, sort of I feel very lucky to have sort of become friends with the people like I'm friends with and the network and all that kind of thing. And like, your people really take care of you. Like, I like to
For
think I
sure.
take care of them, kind of thing. So like protecting yourself by like building this killer team around you, vendors, friends, clients, kind of thing. So I don't know. I wish people would treat you. I wish people would treat you the way you treat them, kind of thing.
Right.
Kind of thing, which is like, I guess it's a, in the old days, like etiquette was everything, and people sort of stepped out of line, like people got blacklisted or like kicked
Yeah.
off the what kind of thing differently than now. Um, you know, and,
It almost
so
seems like a bunch of what you're saying boils down to education.
sure,
Um, where as producers, you need to educate the your marketing team. They need to educate the buyers, and the buyers need to educate the consumers. And there needs to be some continuity there in education so that you aren't facing people that have like as a consultant, you're not going into a situation where you're facing these undesirable expectations where it's not necessarily unrealistic in certain aspects, but not it's not feasible within what they have available to them to work with, which is something that keeps coming up in this conversation, right? Like how often it is that you see people expecting something that they can't execute on, or they don't have the team or the resources to execute on, but then working with that expectation as though it's going to happen, and watching the sort of bricks crumble around those expectations as it doesn't come to fruition, and the frustration and the anger and the blaming and the ego clashing and all these different things that come up from just miscommunication or an uneducated person. And not necessarily, I'm using uneducated simply because like there's parts of this community and the culture around cannabis that I feel like when you're growing the plant, you have this connection to it. When you're consuming the plant, you have this connection to it. And everything in between is kind of not, it's not necessary in a lot of aspects. And so when there's whole industries built around that unnecessary part, you lose a lot to this capitalistic suck hole, right? Where it's unfortunate because it's how we are able to get the product to the consumers because of all the different regulations and you know uh, the actual logistics of it. Um, but there is this huge disconnect then between what people are saying, I want this in my joint, versus what the grower is going like, I can't grow a 14-week sativa and get it to you in a $10 joint. There's no way I can
yeah,
do that. No one in
it's
their
not
right
real.
mind
Yeah,
is going to grow that. And so when the sales team is saying we need sativas, I need a 14-week sativa. That's what people are
like bro, I've
asking
had
for.
that
And you go,
conversation 3 times in the last 2 weeks, kind of thing.
it's 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 unfortunate, but like it's almost hilarious how uneducated it is, because it's something as simple as the disconnect of, you're saying you want a 14-week sativa. You're doubling our input cost and our overhead to produce that single gram. Let's just talk about it as a gram, right?
100% correct what you're saying.
How are we going to do that? Tell me how we're going to do that, and tell me how it's going to maintain profitability,
But
because
you
you're
need
getting
it.
enough ask for it, right? But
Yeah,
yeah, so oh,
yeah.
it's frustrating. I've been there, and
And like
we
you've probably
find
done
other
it. Like
plants.
we've done like grower events. You go to the dispensaries so you could customers can come ask you questions, and you sort of put out like blogs and newsletters and stuff like that. And again, it's I just feel like it's one of those things of, and we're not the only ones that talk about it. Obviously, like everybody talks about like sort of consumer education plans and all that kind of stuff, and it's just one of the harder parts. And like sometimes deal with like sort of I don't know, like was at a grow the other day, and like sort of they had their wish lists and thoughts, and like we're trying to push stuff on you, and you're kind of like, bro, I've had bigger veg rooms than your whole facility, like
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like you've never worked in a garden, like what you're telling me we need to do or asking us to try to help you do is just not real, kind of thing. And like I said, I've had bigger veg rooms than the whole facility, kind of thing. And just like the stubbornness or whatever, kind of thing to try to like achieve these, goals at the end is really hard. And again, like the other thing, again, like I feel like, we mentioned earlier some of these smaller, more craft grows. Like I love those craft licenses. Like if I could have my own, that's what I would do.
Oh yeah.
Like Absolutely, because then it's like authentic, it's real, like it's owner operated, kind of thing. I think some of these facilities get in trouble. Maybe this is the part people don't want to talk about, but you're like, how much of these big facility staffs um, don't really make the company money? They're there to fulfill roles because they're such a big company and it needs it.
Hmm.
All those salaries drain, kind of and make it really difficult for them to be profitable, which then lead to cutting all the corners and
Sure.
that kind of stuff. So again, like I don't know, I just give me an opportunity for like those craft size facilities where it's a team of 4, 10, maybe fit whatever, put those small crews together and like some of the best product I've seen here in Colorado, from like smaller grows, their stuff's pre-sold at $6 a
Yep.
pound.
It's like
And
two
it's
growers and two trimmers, and that's it.
well, these guys are about seven, but they've all been 7 guys in this facility, but they've been together for 4 or 5 years, and their work is killer. Like I'd
That's
be excited
awesome.
to go buy it, kind of thing. It's in the Flow guys in Boulder, kind of thing. Like I don't know, but like that's what a team, they pay their guys well. Their team is super loyal to them. They go perform and execute in the garden. Like their product is killer. Like that's the successful like facilities and teams, I think.
I agree.
So
I see that all the time. Like you got to have a happy staff in order to have a good product, and unfortunately, so many people are just trying to go for like uneducated and unskilled labor, and then just trying to like bring them up in a certain way, which can help, but also there's so many opportunities there for there to be um, a mistransfer of information where you can't then apply
yes.
that knowledge elsewhere. And so you're like training them to do the specific task, and when you ask them to try and then apply that knowledge in a different way, it doesn't always work. And um, it's tough because it is an agricultural product, and so I don't see the price ever going back up. And a lot of people for a while there were saying, "Oh, we're waiting for the market to rebound." It's not going to happen. There's there's no there's no reason for it to happen. There's only a reason for the price to continue to go down.
I feel like my only little pushback to that is I do think that like people will be brand loyal to somebody that has true,
Sure.
kind of thing. So like some of these smaller ones, like you'll always be able to get, you'll always be able to be profitable with your work. 'Cause you're good enough to hit, grams per square foot kind of thing, and dot, all that stuff down the line. Maybe you're not printing money like the old days kind of thing, but like it is profitable. You can pay your people right. All of the correct inputs that you want without like skipping something. So I don't know. I think that that's just kind of why it's like that balance point of that sort of craft size garden is a very happy medium for um,
For sure.
to go hang out in kind of thing. It's safe.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. I was kind of more referring to this constant race to the bottom that you see a
Oh
lot of
yeah, yeah. I
different
mean, we've done that.
operators. Yeah, and so like by racing to the bottom and by uh, by showing that the value of the product can be reduced, you're not going to then trick anybody by trying to raise the price of something at the same quality point
Yeah,
and saying this is worth more now when they were already paying, you know,
yeah,
a lower price for it. And when it comes to those larger facilities and those larger producers that are still producing quality at scale, that's where I feel like it's a problem for the overarching market, because when you do have small craft farms like you're talking about that are able to achieve a $1,600 price point per pound, or even some people that are breaking it up into eighths or quarter ounces or ounces even, and selling those at a high price point so that their overall pound price is, significantly more. If there's only room for like extremely small boutique and highly sought after with limited supply cannabis to be able to achieve those high price points. It's never going to be for anything that's mass produced.
yeah.
Um, at least in my mind, that's where I make that differentiation.
Even working at like Way to Grow, like people would come in with receipts from 3 other grow stores and be like, they said they would sell it to me at that, like. So like it's one of those things I feel like across the board, everybody's getting beat up with that race to the bottom idea, and
Right.
um, it's, yeah, it's one of those things of like it beats everybody up like across the board, and it's hard to deal with.
It does.
But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it's certain things will never come back up. Certain things will be good because they've earned it.
Yep. Those guys with 8 lights that are still operating in the gray market, they're the ones that are making a killing right now, and hats off to them. Let them keep doing it.
I know I miss those days.
Right. I'm
Uh,
envious. I'm envious, but I have other obligations, so that's it's out
yeah,
of the
now we're all
question,
grown
right?
up and yeah, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I'm not about to be running midnight runs with 20 pounds in the trunk.
Yeah, it's one of those things of like, sometimes you joke about, you're like waited for all these years. You're like, is my door getting kicked in tonight? Am I getting robbed or arrested? Kind of thing. And sort of, I guess, glad to sort of have moved on from some of that. But I guess at the same time, some of the
Definitely.
romance and the sparkle of that was a whole lot of fun.
Oh, for sure. I mean, aren't the greatest, like the greatest novels are like tragedies, I feel like, and so we don't want to live that tragedy though anymore. Um, let's see, what are some of the successes that you've encountered when helping out a facility that are a highlight for you? And then also, if you don't mind sharing, what might be a couple of or a failure point in when trying to help implement these different things at facilities where, through both the success and the failure, you learn something tremendous from it.
Sure. So I guess we'll start with the failure part kind of thing. I feel like sometimes again it goes just back to like communication and education kind of stuff. And like Sarah said, like teacher. If you could just imagine the class behaves differently when you have a substitute teacher than like the regular teacher. Yeah. So when it comes to some of this stuff, if you're not tight with the cultivation team that's on the ground there, like sometimes you fly in for a week and then you're back in Colorado for a week or to a different site for that week. You sort of stagger back and forth and you still have your sort of cultivation meetings and, like that kind of stuff. But like, when you're away, if the staff isn't like backing you and sort of performing to, um, what they were supposed to do that day, or even almost like a little malicious and we're like, oh, we're not going to do that because he's not here this week. Then it really turns into a battle of like us versus them, and they have a whole
Hmm.
staff on there. They all live there, and I'm just a guy getting on a plane flying back and forth, that's coming to tattle on them or whatever, kind of thing. So like that's like the hardest thing. And some of them are really hurt because like you get really close with cultivation team, kind of thing, but then the owner doesn't want to pay for something anymore. What, kind of it just turns into a little bit of a battle of like us versus them. So that's kind of just why at this point, you know, now that we're like private and it's just like sort of myself, Rich and Christian versus like this whole big publicly traded company, it's easier for us to like sort of insert ourselves in as being like an owner's rep and being with them kind of thing versus, sort of the bosses over here trying to push revenue for whatever board in New York and stuff like that, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
like, it's like you get to one sometimes I'll joke or complain, be like, why do I care about your garden more than you do? You know, um, like
That's a tough conversation to have.
yes, so I feel like that's like that. I don't want to say failure part, but it's like the uglier part kind of thing. Because like as a consultant, there's lots of high fives, hugs, and partying. When things are working, but if things, there's the hiccups, lots of finger pointing kind of thing. Sort of. So like, when things work, there's like almost say no praise, but like everybody expects it to be that way, and then stuff gets a little sideways and, fireworks kind of thing. So,
Oh, for sure. I mean, no
yeah,
one
I'd
brings
say
it
that,
up when it's working, right? No one takes
yes,
a lawnmower into the shop to get it fixed because it's working. They go in
yes,
because it's broken and it's not working. And when you're the one in charge of the fixes, right? Like you're the repairman for their grow. They're looking at you for all the failure points, especially if any of it happens after you've already come on to the team to help
yeah,
them execute on what they're doing. A lot of it, though, like you're saying, especially with larger teams, and if that team doesn't feel connected to this style of growing and the direction that they're being given, then you start to run into little clashes that might not even be like you might not even see it as what it is that's generating this issue, but the outcome of that issue is still then affecting the grow in one way or the other.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like you need to get on board or hop the fuck off because this train is going, and we're here to make sure that it's going to continue to go. And when you give someone, something simple, like let's say it's IPM SOP, and there's
That's
two
one of the
people
big.
that are
You
exec.
nailed
Oh, it
it.
is.
Yeah, you
Oh, it
nailed it,
is.
man.
And when you have people that are, you say, this is what you do these days of the week. You do it every single week, and you do not fail to do it. And then you come in and they say, "Ah, I've been doing it." And you go in and you're like, "There's motherfucking russet mites on these plants. If you were
Speaking
doing it,
of, like
I
sulfur
wouldn't
and
see
oil
these
doesn't
right here."
mix. Yeah, sulfur and
Yeah,
oil
and
do
sulfur
not
and oil don't
mix.
mix. And when
So
you,
you're like, you come in and they're like, well, I sprayed, they're like, I don't know what happened. You're like, bro, that phototoxicity from that, application, every leaf in this room is burned up. Like, there's
did
nothing
you say
left
you
on these
sprayed
plants.
suff oil on Monday and sulfur on Tuesday? Oh, ah,
Yeah.
ah.
I wonder why it looks like, yeah, it's like that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So there's that, kind of thing. I guess along those same lines, though, like the sort of the most like rewarding part, like I feel like I've been asked this question a handful of times and like the answer has evolved a little bit. But like, when you're working in a garden where like everything's jamming, like all the plants look good, people are in a good mood, like music's bumping in every grow room kind of thing, like that vibe is like intoxicating kind of thing. So
that's
like
contagious.
totally, so like there's that, but like along the lines of that, like some of I feel like my like greatest success story, homegirls, your first harvest at a new spot. And they're like, does anybody have any friends that can come in and help harvest or whatever? So the one girl brought her boyfriend in, like no job, no whatever, never touched a cannabis plant before. But on day one of harvesting, like, his hands were moving faster than anybody else's. So he's like hired him on, and then he was working just in the harvest and like the trim team, and then sort of moved him up to like the sort of processing space. Um, and then next thing you know, I brought him outside with me to run the outdoor. And within a year, he went from being one of the girls' boyfriends that came in for like temp work to running the whole facility. And it was like,
Wow.
kind of thing where like when you get to like sort of like I said, maybe whatever, I'm a teaching background, but like you find like the younger version of yourself or just somebody super like in
For
it for
sure.
the plant kind of thing, and you get to like sort of bring them up, like that's fucking rad, kind of thing. Because like I don't know,
And this
like
this analogy might be distasteful, but sometimes you need them to drink the Kool-Aid. Like
yeah,
you need them to be like on board with the process and not hey, I read somewhere over here that this might work. Do you think we should try it? It's like, yeah, maybe in a couple years when you have everything that's already here down and it's operating properly, and then we can start to play and have
but
fun. But
even
up
with
until
that though,
then,
they're reading on their own. They're doing what kind of thing. You're like,
I mean,
yo, dude,
it does, yeah.
yeah, kind of thing. You're like, I'll give you the books. Here's the websites. Listen, So it's like when
Yep.
somebody does like go to do homework after you just worked 8 or 10 hours or however long in the fields, 100 degrees in Oklahoma, and
Yep.
you're still going home and reading about cultivation methodologies to come in and ask me more questions. Like,
Yep.
I'll take you to lunch every day. Like, let's do it. Kind of thing.
Yeah,
So like,
absolutely.
so like when you find those, at the same time, like I said, the rewarding part is like when you find those, you can sort of build those relationships and those teams, and like you see somebody's life change because of the plant
Hmm.
and learn in the same way as you did. Like it's fucking cool, and like,
Oh, absolutely. One
like
thing that I
they,
like to Oh, sorry. One thing that I
I
like
just,
to do
sorry.
with people is if they have an idea for something that they want to implement in the grow, I'll say, listen, I want you to tell me why we do the things that we are doing now. And when you can tell me why we're doing those things, then I want you to tell me why we should implement this other thing. And if it works, and if it makes sense, and you understand how it's going to interface with these other processes, then let's give it a try. Let's go. Because if it's something I didn't think of, I never be the smartest person in the room, right? You don't want to be there and try to be like, I know everything and I am the all-seeing eye. It doesn't work.
Yeah, so like I encourage. It's one of those things where you're like you sort of present the idea, discuss it, whatever, like can we do this in a controlled setting where we're going to get to actually see a result? Like, so I don't know, like it is really fun and super rewarding and I guess like one of my other favorite parts of it, I guess, is like, you've done this for however long and like lots of people that have done it like we have. You can walk in somewhere and you're like, takes 5 minutes to put together that like low-hanging fruit list of ways that we could improve this. You're like,
Yep.
ding, ding, ding. Like you're already, all right, we're already done. Like we just stepped this up. Yeah. In whatever sort of, I guess, grading scale that we are. But like, I don't know. Like I love the creative problem solving part of it. And then when
Absolutely.
like the light bulbs go off with them and you actually get to see those improvements like quickly. I don't know. Like
For sure.
again, it's like, at this point, th- there's no secret sauce, there's no whatever. It's basically how controlled of like an understanding do you have across like all of the aspects to balance it out.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like one of the things I've seen someone that I've worked with do that I was just like, you get it, you're starting to get it, is when they started to understand why the EC would increase in the substrate. I tried to have them problem solve it by giving them the idea of saying, make a salt solution in water, keep one in a cup, like a full cup, and then keep one and a half a cup. How much salt's going to be left when that water evaporates? And watch them problem solve that out, and then go the substrate's the cup, and what we're putting into it is the salt solution. And what's coming out is when you're adding more water to that salt solution, but still maintaining the volume. And I'll go through this like process with them to try and have them just relate it to table salt in water and
Yeah.
in a cup, and it usually works pretty well to get them to go, oh my gosh, I see that if I'm allowing it to dry back too much and I'm not pushing that extra salt off, it's just going to keep building, and I don't want it to go too high. But you say I do want it to go a little high, and you start to go, yep, just keep an eye on it, keep monitoring it, and you see some tremendous results. I have a buddy right now he swapped over from this multi-part um, semi-organic, semi-synganic, large pot system to where I'm like, just, I want you to do 1 gallon cocoa. I want you to do drain to waste, and we're going to up your EC slowly. And he's amazed by how fast the plants are growing. And I'm like, it's
But
fun to watch, isn't it?
that's why like said like give me can of cocoa flex pots, the 1 gallons, your cocoa A and B nutrient with a little bit of a drip. And like, put somebody on with that. And you're like, yo, if you can do this, then you can get it creative and do whatever you want later, kind of thing. But like it really is that simple to knock it
For
out of the
sure.
park kind of thing. And
Definitely.
I don't know, but yeah, like like explain it like you're talking to a second grader. If everybody can understand that kind of level, then like that's true comprehension and we can move forward. No, don't need to
Absolutely.
ever try to be too smart.
Yeah, and such a huge part of education is the continual education of the people who are teaching, right? And so by teaching other people, I feel like it's always been the best way for me to hone my own knowledge of a subject, because if I can teach it, then I have a better grasp on it. And if I can teach it to people across a multitude of learning preferences, then I can know it even better, right? And so that's why I love doing this podcast and talking
Yeah.
to all different people, and honing my own skill through these conversations. Um, and with
Well, it's
new
like even
growers,
trading stories though, you're like
right.
this worked for me, and like along those same lines, like I don't know. Sometimes I really wish I had my garden. That's my like showpiece, masterpiece, whatever, kind of thing.
Yep.
Sometimes I certainly really wish I had that right now. Kind of, but at other times, like I'm talking to a different, half dozen to a dozen different gardens that, you're sort of like invested and involved in all at the same time. So like if you're trying to sort of make whatever one correction here and there and whatever, I'm waiting 6 days or 10 days before I implement certain things, versus waiting 2 months. So you're able
Right.
to like with that process of deduction and like hone in on whatever like you're trying to achieve and sort of get to that result so much faster by having your hands in, so many friends' gardens or whatever, like, that kind of stuff. So it's just like,
For sure.
I don't know, again, simple, control, like reflect on it. But like, one of the other things I feel like, along the same lines that we're talking about, when it comes to success and failure stuff, sometimes it's like fail faster. Like this person doesn't fit this role, move on to the next deserving person, or like,
Yep.
this application of whatever, we're trying to manipulate the plant with, like, doesn't fit. Like, don't keep forcing it. It's not, yeah, it didn't work 3 times already.
Right.
You hoping it's gonna work the fourth time, like, isn't gonna make it happen. Like, move on,
That
fail
is the
faster, move
definition of
on.
insanity, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like just that idea is like fail faster, again,
Yep.
reflect and get back at it.
Absolutely. And I feel like with both of our, I feel like we both have sort of this passion and focal point of education in a lot of what we're doing, like me with the podcast, you with what you're doing through your consulting services with Next Big Crop, and even in your past with, helping educate people and even learning from your interactions with people at the grow shop and at all the different aspects of the grow world that you've encountered through your career. So I feel like you'll be a great person to ask this question to. And I want to break it up into two parts.
Okay.
So the question is, what advice would you give to new growers? What's that one piece of golden advice you'd give to new growers? And I want it to be for someone who is home growing for their medicine as part one, and for someone who is trying to enter the cannabis industry as part two.
Sure. So part one, um, for a home grower, for like medicine and passion projects and just like the craft and like the love of it. Like these days, like I guess there's people like you with these podcasts, that are such an open book of information. Um, all the YouTube channels, all just the reading that is out there, kind of things like do your homework. And sort of, again, also at this point, you probably have a friend somewhere, whether it's in your state or town or across the country somewhere, um, that is like totally invested in like this is their life and like lifestyle and career. It's to sort of like pick a team essentially that you want to sort of join, like a philosophy and methodology, and sort of like follow the, do your research so that you like pick the correct team kind of thing, but then really follow that plan that those people give you or that you like, put together yourself kind of thing until it's sort of a little bit exhausted or like you're ready for the next one. And again, like you don't need all the fanciest everything, like you don't need that much space, but like you do need a plan kind of thing. So like really do your homework and put together a plan and then go execute it kind of thing. Don't
That's
shoot from
awesome.
the hip. So like that's what I would say for the home grower, is the
Do
most
your
important thing.
research.
And just like make a plan and then follow it. And your next round is going to be different than your first one. But like you sort of need to make those mistakes. Push it too hard, underwater. It got too hot, it got too cold. Like the only way to sort of find that sort of happy medium across the board is to push it too hard, to go under. One of my buddies and I talk about, you're like, how long does it take you to figure out a strain? And the answer is maybe 4 runs, maybe 5 runs. First one sort of shooting in the dark. The second one, you probably push it too hard. The third one, you probably back it down too much. Fourth one, ideally, you're right in that butter zone and like really hit it. But if not, the fifth one, you should totally be able to. So maybe a home grower should almost think of it like that way, kind of thing. Like it'll take you 4 rounds to hopefully be comfortable and happy with what you did, because you're going to
Sure.
learn a whole lot in those first four.
And I feel like that's applicable to not only a specific genetic, but any sort of style of growing, and then
Yes.
any adjustment to that style of growing. And once you start to learn about the different aspects of growing more, you definitely have the ability to make those adjustments on the fly, as well
Yep.
as make more adjustments at once, rather than only tweak one or two things in
Yes.
order to make sure that you're tracking what those changes do to your grow. Um, so I think that that's great advice for people, and it falls in line with a lot of what other people have said to that answer, or to answer that question, which is patience.
Yep.
Have patience with yourself, have patience with the growth style, trust the process that you put in place, and if it doesn't work, that's where you get to start to be your puzzler, and you start to get to try and figure out why it didn't work and make an adjustment from there. So I think that's great.
One of the things, just, I guess it's the other one too, but like, I think one thing that, yeah, I realized, through gardening, I don't think I was ever very patient before of a person, but like through gardening, you realize that like you can't fake time. Like it takes 2-ish weeks to clone a plant. Like, you can't fake time kind of thing. And you also
Hmm.
can't fake how much time you invest into your project. The guy that, or the person that puts in 20 minutes a day versus the person that's putting an hour in a day or whatever, but you can't fake time kind of thing. Like the more you put in, the more you get out. And just like, yeah, again, even if that first harvest or second harvest isn't, these big nugs like you're seeing all where, like kind of thing, you're still learning. So just like
Yep,
you really can't fake that time that you invest. Um, so
for sure. That's great.
I guess
And
along the
then
second
on,
line for somebody wanting in the
yeah,
industry, um, man, I feel like this is a loaded one, kind of thing. Um, um, I guess
the
part of it
answer
just
can be
depends.
don't.
Yeah, well, I'm not gonna say that, but
No,
maybe,
I know, I know.
kind of thing. Kind of, you really have to want it, is maybe the first thing. Like, you have to want this to be your lifestyle. It's not just a job, it's not a career. Like, this is a lifestyle that, and again, going back to some of my beginning, I feel like very lucky that I started cultivating like sort of when it was still a little bit outlaw in Colorado. Like, they started having medical cards. And I remember going and getting my medical card at a dispensary, and then, you meet the doctor and you pay your tab, and then like you walk out of the back of the doctor's office into a dispensary, and there's somebody's grandma packing bowls for you, while you could wait and pay with a credit card or, debit card to get a gram or whatever, and you're like, what is it, kind of thing.
Yeah, what is
Um,
going on?
yeah, kind of so like, but again, like, yeah, I don't know, looking back, you're like, that was cool. But you really have to want it to be like, it is a lifestyle, it's exhausting, it's a commitment kind of thing. There's a whole lot of sacrifice that goes along with it. Kind of thing, especially in the cultivation side of it. So um, I don't know, some people want to work in the retail side of it. Some people want to be say, again, like, you really got to want it to do it. And again, I would say at this point, a lot of places are established enough where you could find out the reputation of how a company treats their people. And
Definitely.
I would just make sure that you're joining a team with values and sort of like you feel like is like a like-minded facility or group of people. Because otherwise, some of them are pretty toxic and it's just not like a positive part of life or what you should be doing, kind of thing. Like the whole point
Yeah,
of like cannabis and self-medicating and like the plant and all that is to make people better, happier, like things better, brighter, shinier. So make sure you're joining a team that like is their purpose kind of thing. And if a
definitely.
place isn't that, maybe you gotta pull the ripcord faster than you want, so that you don't like tarnish, something that is so sparkly.
Oh, for sure. I have definitely bailed on different grows, not necessarily like just like cut cord and run, but
Yeah.
I've had to exit different companies just for the simple fact that their values, while were purported to be one thing, ended up being something completely different. Or that you go into some place thinking that you're going to learn, and all of a sudden you're hearing stuff that you're like, I know that this is wrong. Like
Yeah.
this has already been disproven. I've heard a multitude of other people say that this is wrong, and so why are they saying this? Or on the worst end of things, you run into people that are doing a bunch of coke,
Yeah.
drinking a bunch of booze,
Or cleanliness in the
smoking
facility,
on the
man.
job and not paying attention to what they're doing. Um,
Yeah, like cleanliness, dude. Like people like this is similar to, I don't want to say food production or whatever, but like we've done
it
all
is.
that food production stuff. We've done classes in what, like needs to be clean kind of
Yeah.
thing. Like that's one of the first things. Like sometimes you walk in places and you're like, oh wow, I could eat off this floor. Like fuck yeah, this is gonna, kind of thing. Or you walk in and you're just
Hmm.
like disgusted from you're like, yo, I need to burn
Yep.
these clothes kind of thing. So if you don't
For
walk
sure.
in and immediately say, wow, this place is clean, I don't, that's one of my, kind of, I'd say,
Oh, I agree. And clean is sort of a spectrum, right? Like depending on each facility, the level of cleanliness that can be achieved is on a spectrum, and so you have to have, temper expectations, but then also, yeah, if the end goal is to create a product that you are putting into your body, whether it be through smoke, vapor, an edible, a consumable, a topical, anything like this, like it's going into your body. You don't want to go into a place where you don't want your body to be in the room where it's being produced.
And
Like
don't get me
that's a
wrong,
huge
like
point.
some of the best cannabis like ever grown has probably been grown in some old basement somewhere or whatever. Doesn't mean it's not clean. Like doesn't mean they don't follow a
No,
plan, whatever. Like so it doesn't have to be this spaceship. It doesn't have to be so cutting edge
right.
and robots and But like you walk in and tables are dirty or floors are dirty or whatever. Like that's a flag.
Yep. Absolutely. I agree. I think the dirty floors thing is one of the big ones that oh man, you walk in and there's just like muddy footprints everywhere and you go, "Oh fuck."
Yeah,
this
you
is
like you know that
this
when the
is going to
rest
be
of
a
it's
whole
going
thing.
downhill.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Jarrett, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I think that this is a great point for us to start wrapping up and
Okay.
going into a couple of these last little questions that I like to ask. Was there anything else about Next Big Crop or what you do or about cannabis cultivation in general that you wanted to touch base on before we get into these last few wrap-up questions?
I don't know. I guess maybe just like I said, going back, I've said it how many times now, but like sort of feel really lucky to have gotten to sort of come up with certain people. Like, in an ideal world, like give me some dosatrons, like Wally and Chris. I feel like I remember the first time I installed a dosatron. I I was running a spot out in Maryland and came home to a whole bunch of dead plants in my basement, kind of thing. And you're like, Chris, I think it's time. And so he like whipped me up one, and then Wally helped whatever, kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, it removes so much time and like that mental exercise of filling a res and whatever. So it's kind of like I don't know, like I said, I love race cars and building race cars and stuff like that. And so I like look at this like so you have like that part of it,
Yep.
and then like there's like the other part about like we were just talking about being clean. Like Zach, homie over at BioSafe, is a wizard again, when it comes to like the clean chemistry behind this stuff. Like I don't know, I could keep going
Yeah.
on sir about the certain groups of people, like the Canna guys I work
No,
real close with, the Fluence guys and the Gavita guy, whatever, so like make friends with people and like learn from the subject matter experts. And I feel
for
like I
sure.
guess I've done a pretty good job at that. And like sort of always take care of them for them taking care of them, like educating you. Um, and like I don't know, like sort of have a network to solve, any garden in this country, I feel like we're 1 degree away from, solving any major problem. Next big crop is 1 degree away from. Like, I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers because I absolutely don't.
For
But I
sure.
know who does, and all it takes is just like a phone call to get these answers.
Absolutely.
So
I
sort
mean,
of
even
like
with
go
what you,
hang out in a network like that, and like it's a real good spot to be.
for sure. I mean, along the lines of what you're saying, there's so many different things that, someone can introduce you to that will change your life as a grower.
Yeah,
And one of those things kind of with what you're saying is, give me any grow that doesn't have a dosing system and give me 3 dosatrons, an open sprinkler, and a liter pump, and I will change your life
yeah,
in a heartbeat. And you will, you know, you'll think that it's crazy what you can do with something just as simple with as simple as that,
yeah.
and people will, you know, it'll change their life.
Or
They'll
when it comes to
spend half the
IPM
time in the
stuff,
garden.
when it comes to IPM stuff, or when it comes to insert whatever sort of subject matter expert you're pulling in for this, using people that are that expertise and have done it and like actually walk the walk and do it like nationwide or even internationally at this point, like problem solve with those people and learn from them. And you're like, whoa, things work, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah,
you know, so
you're
I
gonna
guess
look at
that's probably
problems
my
in a whole new
closing.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally. You're like, not that it's a problem at this point. You're like, cool, I got it, like done it, kind of thing. Like,
yeah,
there's other fires to put out besides the sort of mechanical aspects to this stuff like that. So
Yeah, without any problems, growing cannabis starts to become pretty boring actually.
That's the
Because
point. It should be. It should go to
it should be
plan.
boring.
Yeah.
Yeah, it like at the end of the day, if everything's going off right, you can probably run 100 light facility with 2 or 3 people in the garden, and each one of them should not be spending more than 40 hours there a week. So
Yeah, yeah, I
that,
think your numbers are pretty right on.
yep. And for anybody that's a home grower, think about it. You can take knowledge that you're learning either from these podcasts or from other shows or other educational resources, and you can put yourself in that position if it is something like Jarret said that you are driven to do, because it does require a lot of dedication. But it can be really rewarding. And in the end, if it's working well, it's not that hard of work, and it's really like I said, it's rewarding, and it's not bad.
Absolutely.
And you got to find the right people though, with the right mindsets to work with and work for in this community though, because there are still a lot of um, let's just say what it is, there's a lot of assholes. And it's not
100%.
just in this community and industry, it's across every industry. And it's, a life lesson to take, to find people that you like working with and that you can align your philosophies with, to make sure that you are not there struggling to get through to the end of your shift or the end of the day.
Yeah,
Um,
like honestly, like that's like me and Jesse like met up at a spot that, he's, had to walk away from and whatever, it's one of those things, but like, you meet somebody, you get to talk to them for 20 minutes and you're like, huh, you're pretty cool, kind of
yeah.
thing. And like, like next thing you know, you're like, how many years later, how much do I talk to you every week? Kind of, across the board, like we'll probably start talking a lot after this too, one of those
Oh,
things of
for
like,
sure.
like, I don't know, I literally almost every facility we've ever worked at, I like still talk to the people at those spots like regularly. Yeah, whether it's like talking genetics or whatever, plant stuff, or even cars, sneakers, food, whatever, kind of like, you become friends with these people in the garden because you shared something with them, and it's real and it like carries on.
Yeah, it's a tight knit community when it comes down to it. There's a lot of issues with communities that are that tight knit. You get a lot of incestuous, reciprocal, fuckery that is not necessarily the best in some cases. But then you can build these long term friendships and bonds with other people that are within this industry. And in a lot of ways, that's you know those are the people that will be in the future, the giants whose shoulders other people are standing on. Whereas we're standing on the shoulders of so many giants before us, and all of the bullshit that they went through in the prohibition era, and are, even still, there's a lot of issues with that now. But there's so much of the information that we're drawing from to be able to help all these different growers perfect what they're doing in their own style. We didn't start it. We're not even the people that are continuing to discover it, because that's happening in other agricultural industries. And we're just trying to make it the best that we can with the information and the circumstances that we're given the
Like
legality and
one of
the
my last
history and
whatever
everything.
fun stories of it, like one of my homies went to college with in Ohio 20 some years ago. Yeah, when he moved out here too, and yeah, he's a raft guide and ski bum and all that kind of stuff. And he used to trim all my product for me with me, And then he went and got his MBA, and so we would listen to his like textbooks while he's getting his MBA and trim circles and stuff, and like now his company's hired my company, I've hired it, like whatever. So like,
Nice.
like and like even just going back to other stuff, like I don't know, who doesn't love traveling, kind of thing. But like, can't tell you how many trips to Mexico, Costa Rica, Europe, like Croatia, Italy, like like different sort of groups of cultivation people that have traveled the world and done really cool shit together. And it all is because of this plant, that
Yeah.
you're, on some sailboat in Croatia doing whatever, kind of just, rafting the Grand Canyon, like with a whole bunch of wild motherfuckers that, like, so it's just one of those things like, there's, like I said, it's a lifestyle and, like sort of you stay, I'm from Philly, so like Allen Iverson has a tattoo CT on his neck, like crew thick, it stands for, and I feel like that's one of those things of yeah, I don't know, I sort of subscribe to it. Like you take care of your people, and like you know,
Definitely.
so
Yeah, I feel that. I feel like, yeah, finding the real ones in this industry, you latch on and you try to just build that group up even further. And so yeah, I think that's a great place to kind of end our main conversation on. So let's go into a couple of these fun little wrap up questions, and
The
we'll wrap up from there. So favorite strain of all time?
loaded question, but
Of course.
yeah, maybe when I was younger, and I guess like we was talking about, still chasing it. I talk about it too often. I feel like the first time you're like I don't know, like a sour diesel or just a diesel that like when you would walk in the bar 15 years ago, with a Ziploc baggie and you could have a gram in your pocket, everybody in the bar would point at you and go, "You have sour diesel in your pocket." Like I miss
Yep.
that diesel. So I love some diesel. First, then nowadays we're talking older stuff. Also, like really love like a good Indiana bubblegum is like I don't know, love it kind of thing. So like for some of the older stuff, like your diesel, your bubblegum, I don't know, like some headband, like same kind of family. In our circle of
Yeah.
friends, like Chuck and John had this cut of Hong Kong that I've bought a bunch of different cuts of Hong Kong over the years. None of them have been anything like it, so I don't know what this really was. But this Hong Kong was stellar. A buddy got arrested one time, and they walked him into the police office with it, and he had smoked a couple grams out of the ounce kind of thing. But every cop in the police office, I guess, kind of congratulated him on the way out because it made the whole office smell kind of thing. And that Hong Kong was like, anytime used to cut that would come around, like I would load up for myself just because it was like nothing I'd ever seen. Like that was probably the first like exotic cannabis I'd ever like latched onto. So yeah, diesel, bubblegum, Hong Kong in the old days. The
I've never
cookie
heard of
wreck.
Hong Kong. What
Again, I have not. This one might have been something else and mislabeled or whatever, because
sure.
all these Hong Kongs I've had since have been not like you would not. It's just not the same.
Okay.
Um, so hunting for it kind of thing. If anybody has a Hong Kong, I'd love to trade for it. Um, then the cookie wreck, those seeds that I popped, it's like 2011. I think it's just smell, taste, whatever. Like it's performance enhancing. Like it like makes you like creative and tunnel vision. Of like every broom stroke would be the same if you're sweeping a floor. Like I swear you leave the house and you're like uncomfortable, and then the same spot on the highway, you're like windows down, turn the music up, like I got this. It's like artistic and creative weed, like performance enhancing. And then I guess some of the more recent stuff, like I don't know, like now I'm older and don't want to be so sped up. So like I love some Cushman, like proper Cushman. So I know like what people might say, whatever, like smell, taste, whatever. I love how it makes me feel.
For
At
sure.
this point, I want herb that like, we all sit like this too much. So like something that opens your chest up and gives you better posture is like one of the ways I like sort of judge cannabis. So like I don't know, I want something that makes me feel better. I love some like Arcai. I've had that pie face that came out a couple years, a long time ago at this point. Without a bunch of THCV in it, so it was like a diet weed. So my
Yeah.
girlfriend had me go hunt that out, and we found a really killer winner of that. I guess most recent thing that's my new favorite, Skunk Tech and Mean Gene's Pie Scream. That's like the
Oh,
best tasting herb. I fucking love that pie scream.
I've heard nothing but good things about the pie
I'll get you a
scream.
cut. It is so, it's stunning, attractive. It's like as advertised. It's as attractive as you would hope something is, and it's not purple. It's like your seafoam green, like almost sweet
Yep.
mint, like gum green color. Stunning. Test 35 plus at a bunch of different spots for us. A handful of spots we've shared it with. And it's like you're like as advertised, like it smells, it tastes as good as it smells, which is as good as it
Mm,
looks. Like, ding, 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 like down that line.
yep.
And it's just a very unique flavor. It's fruity without being runcish. Like it's very unique in its own
For
way.
sure.
And I don't know, so that's like my
It's
new favorite.
it's unfortunate because I have this thing where like I really don't want to grow ugly weed, even though I know
No,
sometimes like a good diesel or something is just gonna look like bullshit when you're growing it, compared to what you might be used to if you are growing these purples and the different runts and candy gases and all these different things that are popular within the market. Those are pretty and fun to grow. The senescence in them, the color change, everything that happens to that plant as it grows, you're just like, oh, this is fun and enjoyable visually, um, olfactorily, all these different things that you're just like, oh, I love this. Um, and I think that's one of my pitfalls where I'm just like, I don't want to grow any green weed. I know that it might be good, but I'm sorry, I don't really want to grow it.
I don't know, I have this new like Mercy, not really new, but it's from Gage Green, out of Michigan. It's like TK by Glue by High School Sweetheart, and it's like green and sort of rubber nostalgic kush. I don't know.
Mm,
It's one of those things where like I haven't tasted anything like that in a while, so that's sort of like a new favorite on the list as well. But
I
it's
probably
green
would grow it
again.
and love it either way.
Yeah, it's green again though. It's really shiny. It's got
Yep,
the sparkle, whatever. But again, it's like green. It is
yep.
nowhere near purple. And
We've been growing a Cutta Sherb cocktail lately, and it is green with just, tinges of purple as it like in the last couple days, but it is so loud and it's such a yielder that I'm just like, oh, I guess I'm growing green weed right now.
yeah, there you go. Uh,
Yep. Cool. Well, so that, you have of course, with someone with your experience, it's going to be really hard to pick out one strain that you like. And so I'm totally fine with it just being a bunch of different ones that are
well,
kind
it's
of
like
as it's developed over the time.
nobody at this point's just got one jar on their table, man. Like kind of thing. You're like, what time of the day is it? What are we doing? Like, that's there. We all have, I guess, options in front of us, kind of thing. But I guess if I had to
Sometimes too
pick
many.
one, I know. Yeah, so I don't know, just kind of got to cut a Durban poison back and put that through dissection. I can't wait to run
Nice.
that because that used to be a favorite too, and hadn't really seen something that was like that textbook Durban poison, where it is 100% like recognizable, whatever. So that's just coming out of dissection like as we speak, pretty much kind of thing. So I can't wait to get that
Cool.
back on the table. Um,
Nice.
but
All right.
yeah, I don't
Well,
know,
next
whatever.
question.
Yes, go
Yeah,
for
no,
it.
cool. Favorite breeder of all time?
I don't know if I could even pick one in all honesty. I guess sort of I go through phases, like went through an archive phase for a while. Um, you know, yeah, I guess did a whole lot of archive work for a long time and just sort of like kept finding winners, out of
Yep.
everything. That cookie rec came from Canaventure. I guess during COVID went on a total like 808 genetics out of Hawaii run. I don't know. Bloom does killer work too. Um, I don't know,
Well,
sort of.
let's kind of curtail this
Yes,
question
go
to
for it.
your specific set of interests and skill sets. So, if you had to choose one breeder that you were to curate your next quarterly cut menu from and hunt all of the seeds yourself, you have unlimited time to hunt the seeds and unlimited space to hunt all the seeds that you want to hunt, but you have to curate your 18 cultivars or however many cultivars for your clone list. What breeder would you go for to start hunting through a bunch of different packs?
First, great job narrowing that question down. You nailed that. That was really good sort of parameters to put it in.
It makes it harder but easier at the same time.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to think like who's got 18 different things that's going to cross my menu that I want, kind of thing. Maybe Bloom at this point, like kind of diverse enough where it's like gonna touch your soury, gonna touch like fruit in the like different fruit categories, kind of thing. Gonna touch some nostalgic with also being relevant and new. Um, I don't know. That's probably my answer for lack of
For sure.
with your parameters, just kind of like who would I go holler at? Like that's who I'd go holler at to go try to pick 20 different things to go chase. Because like
For
so,
sure.
I don't know, like you need the diversity. Who like because like or I don't know, like Alex from Clearwater has done a whole bunch of killer work over the years, and I've
That would
cupped
be
lots
another
of
good
his
one. Yeah.
seeds because he's really diverse too. So I'd probably call Alex. To be honest, whatever. Between the two of them, either Clearwater or Bloom, just because I want a menu that's not so focused on one trait or I need a
So
diverse
my mind
menu.
immediately goes to CSI Humboldt.
Great answer, classic answer, kind of thing.
Especially if you're trying to curate with a bunch of different flavors. I just pick up S1s of everything that I wanted to run and
No,
hunt
you
120 seeds of them.
yeah, you nailed it on like being able to diversify a menu out of the gate that way. And it's also your nostalgic classic plus new, kind of thing.
Yep.
Like, all right, your answer's better than mine. Um,
Oh, it's not about better or worse. I feel
yeah,
like it's because a fully curated Clearwater menu or a Bloom menu, oh my God, you're gonna kill it. Like
yeah.
you're gonna have commercial viability out of, you'll probably only need to pop 2 or 3 packs of each genetic to find a true unicorn and run it across facilities across the entire country. Whereas, my methodology, I need to pop like a couple hundred of each one.
Well, like I don't know, like both those guys too, I feel like are very like they touch older work, but they're also very current. So like you're making everybody happy with their menus, kind of thing. I don't know. I guess I've
Yeah,
run lots of Alex's seeds over the years, and like always found winner. Like I don't think I ever walked away without something from packs of his that we popped. Um,
for sure.
so all right, I'll stick with Bloomer, Alex, and Clearwater.
Cool.
And be happy.
Uh, Awesome. All right. Well, last question. What is a most memorable cannabis related experience that you've had and want to share?
Um, Whoa, tough question. Kind of thing. Like I don't know. I feel like there's some. All right, I'm gonna do this in like a three-part answer, kind of thing. Like first
Cool.
one, you remember the first time you hit 2 pounds of light, then you remember the first time you hit 3 pounds of light, and then you hit four. Like kind of like so. Like have like those like specific memories of like self-accomplishment, kind of thing. Like where you're like, oh wow, I didn't know I could do that. I did that,
Yeah.
and you pulled something off. Um, I guess maybe also like this cookie wreck strain, like never shared it really in like the 13 or 14 years, whatever, kind of been running around with that and finally started a whole breeding project with it. I feel like there's just sort of like nothing the way it makes you feel like out of all the genetics like ever grown, nothing is like this. Like if there is a certain medicine in it, to do the studies and the research with, like this is the specimen I would pick. Um, so like excited to finally start breeding with it, um, and that kind of thing. But cannabis specific memory, I don't know. Like also going just back to sort of like the friends, like what it's like showing up somewhere Costa Rica or Mexico, wherever, even like went sailing through Croatia for a couple weeks, and you show up with like your work, and these guys are like, and you're with a group of friends that have supported you and helped you like manage and get through all the, but you're on the sailboat in the middle of Croatia, running around island hopping, and the captain of your boat is like, calling ahead to the restaurant so all the chefs come out to your table and serve you. And all you got to do is give them a little bit of, taste of your work kind of thing. So it's like
Sure.
just like these rad opportunities and like friendships that like it really, and again, it's probably a cop out of an answer, but like, like been
No,
through the
but
trenches
cannabis
with
was the
these
gateway
people.
into it, right?
Yeah.
Like cannabis was the connecting tie for that experience to occur.
And then I guess, all right, just to wrap that up, sort of become friends with, and I guess like I've always seen lots of music. I think there was a good 5 year run, when I was younger where I saw like 200 plus nights of live music a year kind of thing.
Whoa.
Yeah, quite, you know, um, so I've made lots of friends in the music industry. And like at this point, sort of, have one friend that's a photographer. So like I'll trade him, some product and he'll give me prints from the shows and stuff like that. But like, sort of, I guess at this point, sort of like you get to sort of share your work with the band, that's playing at Red Rocks. So like you're getting the band high that's got 10,000 people in the crowd getting high off this music and stuff like that. So like sort of goes back to like I guess it's sort of a joke, but I'm trying to be serious about it and like really want to put together this whole team of like sponsored artists and athletes. But like I'll sponsor any artist. Like I'd give out herbs to all lots of local musicians and stuff like that just because it's like I don't know, like go get the musician high that then plays the music that makes all the people happy,
Right.
kind of thing
Great.
or whatever. So it's like, I don't know. That's sort of whatever. That's probably the highlight for me. Like I said, go fucking get the people high that make the other people happy and like sort of get to stand there in the crowd with nobody knowing that you gave the band all that weed that they smoked and now they're playing for the whole Red Rocks venue or whatever. Like that's the highlight. Like that's the coolest part.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really cool. I think that's a perfect thing to a perfect way to answer that question and a great way to end the show. Jarret, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk and
Man, it's
share
been
your
fun.
story. Yeah, it really has been. And I've made so many friendships through doing this podcast. And oh, there's my dog.
Same
And
here. Here, mine's asleep on the cat.
but I've made so many friends doing this podcast and made like connections that I feel like will definitely last a long time or last a lifetime. And I feel that with you here. So I really appreciate your time and joining me today.
Well, hopefully we get to go do it in real life and go make some of these memories soon, kind of thing. We'll have some good stories. But I also, very much appreciate you inviting me on and getting to share the story and kind of talk and all this stuff.
For sure. Well, like I like to say, sharing these stories helps the community grow. And overall, that's the way we grow. So again, thank you. And we'll talk soon.
Till next time, thank you.